Meet our protagonist Turan. Well, right now, he's just a kid role-playing as a wizard in the village square. His friend is playing the monster, which is basically the standard medieval version of playing cops and robbers. Turan winds up with his little wooden stick and thwacks her right on the forehead. Yes, he hit her for real. She is immediately furious because monsters are supposed to lose, not get physically abused by a tree branch. She demands to play the wizard next, but their fun is interrupted by the local elder, Grandpa Rabus. Rabus is the classic long-bearded village leader who looks like he has lived through 3 separate plagues. The kids look up and ask him the ultimate question: what does it take to become a real wizard? And Rabus drops some incredibly heavy lore. See, in this world, wizards are not just people who read books. They are the apex of humanity. They are nobles and knights who inherited godlike power from their ancestors. Meaning, if you are born a peasant, you are out of luck. Rabus leaves the kids with that massive reality check, but the mood instantly shifts. A couple of villagers run up to him, sweating bullets, and ask if the rumors are true. Rabus's face goes completely dark. It is true. A high-level monster was spotted just outside the village borders last night. It's a massive shadow leopard as big as a house, and it is currently lurking in the woods. The village chief has already rushed to the city to hire a real wizard to deal with it, which is their only hope. The mother hugs her child tight and warns them that going into the forest right now is a literal death sentence. Rabus warns everyone to be careful. Without a wizard, killing a monster is mathematically impossible for normal humans, but there is one person who does not know yet. Rabus looks up, realizing they forgot someone. The lonely shepherd living up on Hisarl Hill. Cut to the hill, where the local wildlife is just chilling in the grass. And there is our guy, Turan. 18 years old, sleeping like he has a mattress sponsorship. He opens one eye, looking incredibly unbothered by the concept of labor. His daily internal monologue is literally just, "This is so boring. Same grass, same sheep, same mountain." Every single day, repeating like a glitching simulation. He is genuinely worried he is going to forget how to speak human language at this rate. Suddenly, a shadow looms over him. Grandpa Rabus is standing there, looking like a disappointed dad who just caught his son sleeping past noon on a Saturday. Turan doesn't even sit up. He just tells the old man to move because he's blocking his sunlight. The sheer audacity. Rabus sighs and asks if he is still holding a grudge over that incident from years ago. Turan's eyes narrow. "You mean when my mother died, and you tried to secretly turn our sheep into community property?" Ouch. It turns out Grandpa Rabus tried to pull a sneaky communist maneuver on a grieving kid, and Turan never forgot it. Turan tells the old man to say what he wants and get lost. Rabus is absolutely fuming at the disrespect. But then, Rabus drops the news. A shadow monster has appeared near the hill. Rabus explains that it's a giant leopard, and that he came up here directly to warn him first. Turan keeps petting his sheep, completely unfazed. He's so relaxed, Rabus wonders if the kid has a death wish. Rabus tells him the city chief went to fetch a wizard, so Turan just needs to lock his doors and stay put. Turan smirks and points out that the old man is actually just worried about him, even if he won't admit it. Rabus gets embarrassed and starts yelling again. Classic tsundere grandpa behavior. Turan tells him to get lost or his bad breath rots his nose off. Seriously, he is roasting this poor old man with zero hesitation. He watches Rabus walk away, huffing and puffing down the trail. Once he is alone, Turan's playful expression disappears. Monsters. Beasts that possess magical energy. He realizes this is a rare chance. He has lived on this mountain his whole life and has never seen a real wizard in person. He doubts a rural village chief can hire anyone high tier, but still, he wants to know how strong official wizards actually are compared to him. Suddenly, his nose twitches, a foul, heavy smell carried by the wind. It's the unmistakable scent of fresh blood, and it is coming from the forest. Turan immediately sets off, his casual stride turning serious. He follows the scent deep into the woods, knowing exactly where it leads. His face hardens as he gets closer. He stops. On the ground, covered in blood, is Grandpa Rabus. The old man warned Turan to stay safe, but he was the one who got caught first. Turan kneels, inspecting the massive lacerations. No normal beast did this. The wounds are clean, deep, and infused with dark magical energy. It was definitely the monster. Suddenly, the ground starts vibrating. A giant armored paw steps out of the shadows. The shadow leopard emerges, radiating a terrifying purple and black aura. It stands towering over Turan, letting out a roar that shakes the leaves off the trees. Cut back to the village, where a young kid is eating breakfast with his dad. He asks how strong monsters really are. The dad looks exhausted and says if normal adults try to fight one, they won't even find their bones afterward. The kid looks terrified, wondering what will happen to their home. The dad smiles and reassures him that the chief will bring a wizard. The wizard will win easily, right? They'll punish the monster, right? The dad nods proudly. Of course, they are divine beings born with the power of magic. They can slay a monster with a single word. Back in the woods, Turan stares right into the beast's glowing yellow eyes. He decides to test that theory. He looks at the monster and says, "Die." A massive burst of magical energy erupts from his body, slamming into the beast. A crimson aura surrounds Turan as he stands his ground, but the leopard just shakes its head. The instant death command didn't work. The monster charges, furious that a tiny human tried to command it. Turan doesn't panic. He utters his second command, "Stop." The beast is instantly frozen mid-air, its claws inches from his face. Turan realizes that while his conceptual magic is powerful, raw words have limits if the physical gap is too wide. The beast breaks through the binding, slamming its heavy paws into the dirt. It is pissed. Its jaw unhinges, ready to swallow him whole. Turan leaps backward with insane agility, dodging the crush. In that case, he murmurs, his mind working at lightning speed. He reaches into his pouch and grabs a jagged stone. A shepherd should do what a shepherd does best. He pulls out his leather sling. The beast lunges forward for a final strike. Turan feeds the rock into the leather and speaks, "Harden." The stone glows with structural reinforcement. He starts spinning the sling, creating a loud whistle in the air. His eyes glow with a sharp, predatory yellow light. "Become faster." The spinning velocity triples instantly, turning into a blur. He plants his foot firmly into the dirt. "Pierce through!" He releases. The rock fires like a literal railgun beam, lighting up the entire forest. The kinetic blast tears through the monster's defensive shadow armor. The beast's arm is completely shattered by the sheer pressure. Blood sprays everywhere as the monster loses its balance. The leopard tries to roar, but it's already too late. The ground beneath them explodes from the shockwave. The beast realizes this is not a normal human. It is an apex predator. Turan loads a second stone, his expression cold. "I'm aiming." The beast tries to turn and run, but gravity is no longer on its side. For the head, the second kinetic beam fires, vaporizing the monster's skull instantly. The absolute destruction leaves a massive crater in the forest floor. Turan stands in the silence, letting out a slow breath. He looks down at the massive headless carcass of the shadow leopard. He complains about where he is supposed to dump a body this big without the villagers noticing. He wipes the blood off his face, looking deeply annoyed. We go back 8 years ago. Turan was 10 years old when he first realized he could levitate objects inside his house. He was thrilled, calling his mother over to show her the floating firewood and kitchen utensils. But his mother doesn't smile. She stands in the doorway, completely frozen in terror. Turan keeps showing off, telling her he can make wind and fire too. Suddenly, she screams, "Stop it!" It was the first and last time she ever raised her voice at him. Turan is startled, dropping the firewood immediately. She kneels down, grabbing him gently by the shoulders, her hands trembling. She asks him if he wants to live a long, happy life with her on this mountain. He nods, confused. "Then promise me this. Promise you will never use this power again. And most importantly, never let another human soul see you do it." Turan asks why. His mother asks if he remembers the stories about the nobles and the knights. He nods. And here is the dark reality of this world's magic system. Purebred wizards are nobles, descendants of the divine Freyan race. But knights are half-breeds, descendants of nobles whose blood mixed with ordinary humans. And even though both can use magic, nobles treat knights like absolute garbage. She explains that Turan inherited his power from his father, who was a knight. Out in the Empire, nobles treat knights as literal slaves and disposable guard dogs. If anyone discovers Turan possesses wizard-level magic without being registered, the Empire will snatch him away, separate them forever, and force him into a life of combat slavery. 8 years have passed since that day. Turan has kept that promise perfectly, never showing a single soul what he can do. He has zero desire to descend the mountain or join their corrupt magic society. He just wants to live his quiet, boring life with his sheep. Suddenly, loud, aggressive pounding shakes his front door. An angry voice screams, "Turan! Get your ass out here right now!" Turan sighs, stepping out of his cabin with a deeply annoyed expression. Standing outside is a mob of angry villagers led by a massive, muscular guy with a mustache. Turan lets out a massive yawn, completely disrespecting their menacing aura. "So, you guys are up here claiming I killed Grandpa Rabbus?" The buff guy grabs Turan by the collar, pulling him close, his face red with rage. He accuses Turan of attacking the old man and throwing him into the woods to be eaten by monsters to hide his crime. Turan stays quiet, looking at the fist clenched around his shirt. Then, he looks at the crowd of young men holding wooden clubs behind the leader. "I get it now," Turan says calmly. "The oldest man in the village went into the woods alone and died, while all you young, strong men were too cowardly to help him. He lets out a cold, mocking smile. You feel so guilty and pathetic about your own cowardice that you need a scapegoat to shift the blame to. And I'm the easiest target. The leader screams in fury, winding up a massive punch right toward Turan's face. Turan casually tilts his head, letting the fist glide past his cheek by millimeters. Magic is convenient. Turan rams his elbow straight into the guy's jaw, sending him crashing into the dirt, coughing up blood. The other villagers charge him with their clubs. Turan reflects on how his magic works. If he wishes for something strongly enough, his mana makes it happen. He whispers, "Fall over." One of the charging villagers trips on absolutely nothing, face-planting hard into the grass. Turan glides through the rest of the mob like a ghost. He doesn't need to cast flashy fireballs, just tiny, invisible physical manipulations. He grabs a guy's wrist, redirecting his own weapon into his face. He delivers a series of lightning-fast strikes, disabling them one by one. To any outside observer, it just looks like he has insane martial arts skills. Their wooden clubs are shattered into splinters. Within 10 seconds, the entire angry mob is groaning on the ground. Turan stands over them, brushing the dust off his clothes. For 8 years, he has hidden his magic by using it like this, subtly, invisibly. You guys should have used this energy to dig Rabus's grave instead of coming up here to get beaten up. A group of village women watching from the path wave their hands in panic, screaming that they didn't come to fight. Turan just glares at them in silence. He drags the unconscious men down the hill, dumping them on the path. He heads back inside, realizing the town is going to be in absolute chaos now. They'll probably try to rip him off next time he goes to trade. Well, whatever. If they try to cheat me, I'll just beat them up until they offer a fair price. Truly a menace to society. He starts to relax, thinking they won't be back for a while. Suddenly, another loud knock rattles his door, a heavy, deliberate fist pounding against the wood. Turan snaps. He rips the door open, ready to absolutely annihilate whoever is left. Who the hell is it now? But he freezes. Standing in his doorway is a massive, heavily built traveler. The man has a scar across his nose and a very calm, professional aura. He apologizes, saying he didn't mean to interrupt at a bad time. Turan blinks, immediately realizing this man is not from their trash village. The traveler politely explains that he's a traveling swordsman and was looking for shelter. Turan's internal monologue kicks in. He realizes he hasn't spoken politely to anyone in years, so this feels incredibly awkward. He looks down at the man's hip and notices a highly refined, expensive sword. Turan puts on his best fake-friendly face and asks if he's looking for the local inn. Suddenly, the traveler's stomach lets out a massive growl. Turan lets out a sigh. He opens the door wider. "Come in." Inside, Turan serves him a massive spread of meat, cheese, bread, and soup. The traveler is absolutely inhaling the food, calling it an absolute feast. He looks at Turan, surprised that a simple mountain shepherd has such high-quality food and speaks so politely. Turan lies smoothly, saying he was born and raised on this hill and has never left, so he just tries to be hospitable to rare travelers. The traveler takes a long drink from his cup, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observes Turan. "Interesting," the man murmurs. He points out that for a simple peasant shepherd who has never left this backwater mountain, Turan's dining etiquette and manners are flawless. Turan says he learned everything from his mother, who passed away a few years ago. The traveler crosses his forehead in a religious gesture, praying that she is resting peacefully with the gods. Turan thanks him, continuing to play the role of the humble, grieving son. But then, Turan asks the real question, what brings a traveler with a high-grade sword all the way out to this sleepy village? The traveler wipes his mouth. "I was hired for a specific job, to hunt down a massive shadow puma." He looks Turan dead in the eyes. "I am an official imperial wizard." Turan acts surprised. "Ah, so you're the great wizard the elders were talking about." The traveler smiles, but his eyes remain completely cold. "Can I ask you a question now, kid?" The traveler looks around the room. "I can clearly sense trace amounts of monster mana lingering in this exact area, but the monster is nowhere to be found, and what's even weirder..." He leans forward, his presence suddenly becoming incredibly heavy and suffocating. "You knew about the elder's death and the monster, yet you are completely calm. You aren't running away." He glares at Turan. "You seem awfully brave for a simple shepherd. Who are you, really?" The word wizard echoes in Turan's mind. We get a quick flashback of Turan as a kid, asking his mother why he can't let anyone know he's a wizard. She looks at him with deep sadness. Because if nobles are the shepherds, then knights are just the sheepdogs they keep to protect their assets. They might treat you well on the surface, but they will sell you off or sacrifice you the moment it benefits them. especially other wizards. If they find out what you can do, they will drag you away from me. Kieran drops the heaviest line possible, essentially telling Tehran that if he wants to hide his magic, he might have to kill anyone who finds out. Our guy is standing there, completely still, looking like he's running the math in his head on how to take out a veteran Imperial Knight in a split second. The silence in the room is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Tehran is literally staring into Kieran's eye, waiting for the hand on that hilt to move. Kieran stays quiet, holding that look. And then, he completely ruins the dramatic buildup by laughing. He tells Tehran that with a reaction like that, his joke is completely falling flat. Tehran literally drops a sweat bead. The absolute emotional whiplash of preparing to commit a murder only for the guy to pull a dad joke is insane. Our guy quickly plays along, apologizing and saying he doesn't really have a great sense of humor. Kieran laughs it off, apologizing for starting things on such a weird note. Kieran smiles, saying he guesses Tehran was just startled because it was his first time hearing a real wizard's joke. Honestly, if this is how wizards joke, they need to stick to spellcasting. Kieran extends his hand, realizing they haven't actually exchanged names yet despite sharing a massive feast. He introduces himself with a warm smile, completely shedding that terrifying aura he had a second ago. Tehran shakes his hand and introduces himself as a simple shepherd. He mentions he's 18 this year. Next to Kieran, he looks like a complete rookie, but we all know who's actually carrying the lobby. Kieran drops his age, 75. Tehran looks at him, totally confused, because this man looks like he's in his late 30s and hits the gym 5 times a week. Kieran explains over dinner that wizards age much slower than normal commoners. Tehran asks how a veteran like him ended up wandering around the countryside. Kieran explains he spent 60 long years serving a noble family called House Arabian before finally leaving to roam the world in his final years. Tehran smiles and says that sounds pretty romantic, and for a split second, both of them just share a quiet, genuine smile. It's a nice change of pace. No fighting, no threats, just 2 guys eating good food. Kieran admits he never realized how nice it could be to just sit down and have a simple, harmless conversation with someone. Before they know it, the morning light starts creeping through the cabin window. Kieran stands up, stretching, realizing they literally talked the entire night away. He says it's time for him to get going. He taps a pure silver coin onto the wooden table, saying these are Arabian silver coins and they should easily cover the cost of the massive dinner. Tehran accepts it, wishing him a smooth hunt. Kieran tells him not to act like they'll never see each other again. He jokes that he might drop by a few more times on his way back just to freeload another meal off our guy. Morning fully breaks over Hisarl Hill. The air is clear, the sun is up, and the landscape looks beautiful. Down on the grassy plains, the sheep are just doing sheep things, completely unaware of the absolute magic monsters roaming nearby. Tehran stands on the hill, opens his mouth, and drops a quiet conceptual voice command, "Gather up." Instantly, the sheep's ears perk up like they just heard a dog whistle. The entire flock immediately falls into a perfect line, marching toward him. Honestly, who needs a sheepdog when you can just rewrite reality with a single word? Tehran watches them, thinking about Kieran. He realizes that was the first time he's ever met another wizard, and he can't remember the last time he talked so comfortably with anyone. He gently pats one of his sheep, reflecting on how cheerful and easygoing Kieran's voice was. He thinks back to his mother's warnings, realizing Kieran was a genuinely good person compared to the others. His whole life he thought knights were just emotionless robotic hunting dogs used by arrogant nobles. But Kieran was different. Tehran looks down at the forest path, wondering how Kieran's hunt is going. Meanwhile, deep in the thick woods of Hisarl Hill, Kieran is walking through the dense brush. He stops, looking around with a deeply puzzled expression. He can see clear physical signs of a massive battle, shattered tree trunks and crushed earth, but he can't feel a single trace of the magical beast's aura. He stands in front of a giant split tree, wondering if the shadow leopard was somehow hunted down by someone else before he arrived. He looks down at a massive pile of ash, completely baffled. If another wizard took it down, why did they just leave it here? He sighs, letting out a breath. He decides that as long as the monster is dead and the local villagers are safe, that's all that really matters. Suddenly, his eyes widen in absolute panic. He whips his head around, sensing a massive, suffocating wave of dark mana appearing out of nowhere. A giant, grotesque, decaying purple hand slams into the dirt path. It's oozing dark fluids, and a massive, singular yellow eye is blinking from the forearm. The ground shakes as a horrifying, multi-jawed titan rises from the shadows, letting out a silent, terrifying scream of pure dark energy. Kieran stares at it, his face turning pale. He realizes exactly what this thing is, a magical beast's corpse puppet. He grits his teeth, sweating profusely, wondering who in the world would be reckless enough to create something this dangerous out here. The giant beast immediately lunges, swinging its massive clawed hand down to crush him. Kyorn dodges backward as the impact completely shatters the ground where he was standing, throwing up rocks and dirt. He moves through the air, explaining the lore to himself: if you don't absorb or disperse the mana from a dead magical beast, that leftover mana rots and pilots the body, turning it into a corpse puppet like this. No real wizard would be stupid enough to forget that. He flips mid-air as the beast's giant maw snaps shut beneath him. He lands, realizing that whoever killed the original leopard was definitely a wizard, which means they deliberately left the mana to rot. He slides across the dirt, deducing that a rookie knight wouldn't have the power to kill a beast of this tier, so it had to be someone elite. Kyorn decides he can't worry about the mystery right now. He holds out his hands, channeling a massive, glowing sphere of pure lightning and fire mana. His veins glow with golden energy as he prepares to unleash his signature spell. He fires a massive, blinding beam of concentrated lightning directly at the beast's chest. The attack hits dead center, causing a massive explosion of light and sparks, but as the smoke clears, the beast is completely unharmed. Kyorn's jaw drops. His high-tier magic was completely nullified. He realizes the monster's mana density is far stronger than his own. Suddenly, the giant beast dissolves into a black shadow puddle on the ground and completely vanishes. Kyorn whips around, panic setting in. He realizes the monster is using advanced stealth magic to counter him. The black puddle quietly bubble flows right behind his heels, completely silent. The massive, grotesque titan rises directly behind Kyorn's back, its razor-sharp claws raised high in the air. Before Kyorn can react, the beast swings, a massive slash of dark energy ripping through the scene. Kyorn gets sent flying, blood spraying from a deep wound in his side. He grits his teeth in agonizing pain, realizing this thing is far beyond what a knight can handle. It would take a high-ranking noble to fight this on equal terms. He crashes hard into the dirt path, rolling through the grass as blood stains his coat. He struggles to sit up, panting heavily. He laughs dryly, thinking about how he survived a major war just to get taken out by a random corpse puppet on a remote mountain. The massive beast towers over him, its multiple jaws dripping with dark drool. Kyorn looks up, wondering if this is the end of his road. He lets out a heavy, tired breath, his vision starting to blur from the blood loss. But then, his expression hardens. He grits his teeth, refusing to go down like a coward. If he's going to die, he's taking this thing to hell with him. He focuses every single drop of his remaining mana directly into his hand, igniting a blinding, roaring flame. The beast lets out a deafening roar and lunges down, claws outstretched to tear him apart. Kyorn raises his burning hand, waiting for the absolute perfect microsecond to strike. He thrusts his hand forward as the beast's massive jaws close in. But before the impact lands, a sudden blinding flash of blue energy cuts through the dark forest. A massive, supersonic kinetic shockwave rips through the air, completely slicing the giant monster's arm clean off in a single frame. Kyorn's eyes widen in absolute sheer shock. The self-sacrifice spell dies in his hand as he looks up, completely frozen. The massive beast's severed arm crashes into the dirt, oozing black fluids as the rest of the monster recoils in pain. And then, a quiet, completely relaxed voice asks him, "Are you all right?" Kyorn looks up and sees Turan standing on the path, holding his sling, looking like he just stepped out for a casual morning walk. Our guy drops a deadpan callback, asking if a shepherd's joke can be pretty startling too. Turan steps forward, winding his leather sling around his wrist, completely unbothered by the giant rotting god monster right next to him. Kyorn is staring at him like he's looking at an alien. He quietly stammers out, "So, you're a wizard?" Turan just stands there, keeping his quiet composure, not saying a word. Kyorn asks a different question. Why did he help? Turan easily could have just walked away and let him die, keeping his secret safe forever. Turan smiles slightly. We flash back to their late-night conversation by the fireplace. Turan had asked why Kyorn went so far to protect a remote village for barely any money. Turan had pointed out that with Kyorn's high skills, he could easily earn way more money doing literally anything else. Kyorn had looked at him, completely serious, asking what else he could possibly do. He explained that these commoners live on the absolute fringe of society, trembling in fear every single day without a single shred of basic protection from monsters. Kyorn said that while it's not Turan's fault, anyone who inherits the power of the gods should feel a duty to use it. He said they should take genuine pride in protecting those who are completely powerless, even if other arrogant wizards don't agree. Back in the present, Turan smiles warmly, repeating Kyorn's philosophy back to him: everyone in this world has their own thoughts and their own way of life. Suddenly, a massive shockwave of green energy erupts behind them as the giant beast's eye flares up with toxic light. Kyorn immediately grabs Turan, panicking, telling him that thing is way out of their league and they need to run right now. He screams at Turan to run down to the village chief, tell him to start a mass evacuation, while he tries to hold the line here as long as he can. The massive titan regenerates its arm, its giant green chest eye glowing with a terrifying apocalyptic magical pressure. Kyorn ignites his flame again, sweating, admitting to himself that he talked big but he has absolutely no idea how long he can actually last against this thing. Turan just looks at him, completely calm, and says it's fine. He says that since his last physical attack worked, he thinks they'll be completely okay. Behind him, a massive stone slowly levitates into the air, coated in a thick vibrating blue mana aura. Kyorn stares at the floating rock, his brain completely short-circuiting. He realizes the attack that sheared a giant monster's arm off wasn't even Turan's full strength. Kyorn's eye dilates in pure, unadulterated awe. He realizes that this wasn't just a convenient chance encounter with some lucky country boy in a rural mountain village, nor was it some reckless, desperate young wizard running away from the noble families. The giant, green-eyed corpse puppet lunges forward, throwing up massive boulders as it charges. Turan stands his ground, looking completely relaxed, repeating that he's curious to see just how strong he actually is. Kyorn ignites his hands, yelling at him that no matter how monstrous his talent is, this beast is a high-level threat and they have to join forces. But before Kyorn can even finish his sentence, the beast sweeps its massive claw with blinding speed. A massive wave of dark wind rips through the path, sending dirt and leaves flying everywhere. Kyorn gets pushed back, his hands glowing with gold fire. He realizes that at his current speed, he can't even react to the beast's attacks anymore. He realizes he'll only get in Turan's way if he tries to fight on the front lines. He decides his only job right now is to act as a tactical guide and help Turan's raw, unpolished talent fully bloom. Turan fires a supersonic kinetic pebble directly at the beast's chest, but the rock passes straight through the glowing green core, leaving the monster completely unfazed. Turan grunts, realizing his physical attacks are failing. Kyorn screams from the sidelines, telling him physical attacks are completely useless because the core of a wraith has no solid physical form. The giant beast slams its massive fists down, chasing Turan across the path. Turan dodges, asking how he's supposed to kill it. Kyorn yells back with fire, or lightning. Turan immediately raises his hand, and a massive roaring torrent of fire erupts from his palm, engulfing the beast's head. But the fire quickly disperses, leaving the green eye glowing brightly. Turan grunts, saying it's not working. Kyorn facepalms, screaming that's not the point. Kyorn explains the core rules of magic. To apply a wizard's power to another living being, you have to establish proper causality. You can't just throw raw elements. Kyorn stops, his eyes widening as a sudden, terrifying realization hits him. He thinks about how the original Shadow Leopard was killed and left to rot, turning into this puppet. He realizes that Turan has literally never absorbed a single drop of mana in his entire life, meaning he has zero training in elemental control. He screams at him, don't just light a fire, construct the spell first, then shoot it with intent. Turan's eyes go sharp. He instantly processes the advice, sliding across the dirt as the beast lunges. He extends his palm, and instead of a wild flame, a perfect, highly condensed sphere of spinning fire mana starts forming in his hand. Kyorn watches, his mind completely blown. Creating fire is easy, but controlling and stabilizing a condensed elemental sphere requires years of brutal training, and this 18-year-old shepherd is doing it literally on his first try, casually holding a roaring sun in his palm. Turan digs his heel into the dirt, launching himself forward with explosive speed. He drives his fist directly into the beast's chest, slamming the condensed fire sphere straight into the green core. A massive explosion of pure white-hot flames erupts, completely engulfing the giant monster. The beast lets out a horrifying scream of agony as the fire starts eating away at its dark mana structure. Kyorn screams at him to keep his mind focused and keep pouring his mana directly into the core so the flame doesn't die out. Turan holds his palm out, his silver hair blowing in the heat as he constantly feeds the fire, completely incinerating the beast's dark form. His gray eye glows with a beautiful iridescent light as he locks his focus. The flames rise sky high, completely burning away every single rotting cell of the giant titan. Kyorn watches the ashes fall, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. He realizes they actually won. He looks at the sky, admitting that was an absurdly powerful wraith that would normally require a high-tier noble squad to take down. He looks at Turan, his face a mix of awe and sheer disbelief. A simple country shepherd from the mountains just soloed a noble-tier threat without breaking a sweat. Kyorn walks up, telling him that if he doesn't want another wraith to form, he needs to absorb the monster's leftover mana right now. Turan looks at him, totally lost, asking how. Kyorn tells him to raise his hand and simply imagine himself draining the energy into his own body. Turan nods, holding his hand out. He closes his eyes, focusing on the dark green energy swirling around the bones. The glowing green mana slowly starts flowing toward his palm like a dark stream. Instantly, a massive vortex of pure green light wraps around his arm, rushing into his body. Tehran's eyes snap open, his iris flashing with a bright, toxic green light. His entire body silhouette is outlined in glowing green veins as the massive raw power of the beast floods his system. His eye dilates from the sudden, overwhelming rush of magical energy. Kieran watches, smiling slightly, mentioning that he should feel a massive surge of pleasure as the mana merges with his soul. He admits he still can't believe his eyes. He asks if this really was Tehran's first time ever absorbing mana. Tehran quiet sighs, confirming it. Kieran explains that after a wizard's initial awakening, their mana pool normally only grows slowly with age unless they kill monsters and absorb their core. He realizes that Tehran was already this powerful with a completely empty, unrefined mana pool, which means his starting base stats are completely broken. He looks at the young man, realizing his genetic potential is on a completely different level than any knight in history. He calls out his name. Tehran turns around, asking what's up. Kieran formally bows, placing a hand over his chest. He says he's been incredibly rude to him and asks which great noble house Tehran actually belongs to. Tehran looks at him, completely deadpan, and tells him to stop being weird. He points at Kieran's arm, telling him to wipe his blood off first because he's literally bleeding out all over his nice clean path. Back inside the cozy cabin, Kieran is sitting down, his arm neatly bandaged up. He looks down at the medical box on the table, still acting incredibly formal, apologizing for making someone as esteemed as Tehran treat his wounds. Tehran sighs, saying he's told him 100 times that he's not some esteemed noble. He's just a simple shepherd who doesn't even know who his biological father is. He glares at him, telling him to stop with the formal bowing. Kieran chuckles, raising his hands, telling our guy to stop looking at him with those scary eyes. Kieran looks out the window at the sheep, asking why a wizard with this much raw power would choose to live as a simple mountain shepherd. It doesn't suit him at all. Tehran explains it was his mother's dying request. She made him swear an unbreakable promise to stay on this hill forever. She warned him that down below the mountain there are ruthless nobles who will only use his magic as a disposable tool and then throw him away. Kieran looks at him, completely quiet, and says she was wise. Tehran looks back, surprised. Tehran admits he's shocked because he always thought his mother was just being an overprotective parent. Kieran shakes his head, saying she wasn't wrong at all. He explains that great power inevitably brings great conflict. Just 20-some years ago, there was a massive civil war between the empire's greatest noble houses. It was a war between House Arabian, the noble family Kieran served, and the ruthless House of Zahar. He looks down, his voice dropping as he mentions that nearly a third of their entire army of 3,000 knights was completely slaughtered in that war. Tehran stays quiet, sensing the sudden weight in the room. Kieran explains that everyone close to him died in that war. His best friend Denver, who wanted to open a laundry shop, his old teacher Hartman, and his beloved wife and son. They were all brutally massacred by House Zahar, and he alone survived. He sighs, saying that's why Tehran's mother was right. A knight's life can vanish more easily and more meaninglessly than a simple commoner's. But then, he looks up, his eyes locking onto Tehran. He says the one thing she was wrong about was Tehran's actual aptitude. He scratches his neck, admitting it's embarrassing to say this while he's in such a beat-up state, but he's actually a highly skilled knight. Yet Tehran easily destroyed a monster Kieran couldn't even touch. He tells him his potential isn't that of a knight. At a bare minimum, Tehran is a noble-level wizard, and among those nobles, he possesses an upper-tier aptitude. Tehran looks down, completely stunned. He thinks to himself, if he's actually noble-tier, then his mother's story about his father being a simple knight was a complete lie. Kieran stands up, walking toward the door. He tells Tehran that in his opinion, it would be much better for him to leave this isolated hill and go out into the real world. Tehran asks why. Kieran explains that humanity desperately needs more strong nobles and knights right now. Humans still aren't the absolute masters of this world. He explains that long ago, other magical races were pushed out by the gods, and they are still hiding in the shadows, waiting for any chance to rise again and destroy humanity. And while those massive threats loom on the borders, the arrogant nobles in the empire do nothing but wage stupid, greedy civil wars against each other. He opens the cabin door, looking back, saying this is an age that desperately needs strong, kind nobles who actually care about protecting people, just like Tehran. He looks at our guy, dropping the ultimate question. More than anything, Tehran isn't actually satisfied living as a simple shepherd forever, is he? Tehran stands there, looking at him, completely silent. He asks what he could even gain by going down the mountain. Kieran smiles, saying that depends entirely on what he wants. Wealth, fame, authority, family, or real friendship. None of that can be found up here on this quiet hill, can it? Kyorn tells him to just try imagining it. He points to the sword and the wooden staff hanging on the cabin wall. He says Turan could wander like him, destroying monsters, or become a legendary explorer venturing into the unknown, or even get adopted into a major house. They walk outside together. Turan looks at the vast horizon, admitting that listening to him, Kyorn might actually be right. He admits that going out into the world sounds a lot more interesting than herding sheep on this hill forever. He smiles, saying that for the first time in his life he's seriously curious about the world outside. Kyorn lights up, smiling warmly, promising that whatever path Turan chooses, he will support him with everything he's got. And then, Kyorn stops, asking a quick question: what is Turan's actual bloodline ability? He jokes that he should have asked this first. Turan looks back, totally confused, asking what a bloodline ability even is. Kyorn chuckles, apologizing, saying he keeps forgetting Turan knows absolutely nothing about official magic systems. He explains that a bloodline ability is a special, unique magical trait that nobles inherit directly from their divine ancestors, the Freyans. It's the biological marker that separates nobles from knights. He asks if there's any specific spell that felt abnormally easy for him to use, or some unique physical trait he has. Turan clenches his fist, thinking. He says he doesn't think he has anything special. He notes that having mana naturally makes a wizard's physical body stronger anyway. He looks down at some rocks in the pond, mentioning the only weird things about him are that he has an abnormally sharp sense of smell, and he's always been really good at throwing stones with high accuracy. Kyorn nods, saying a sharp sense of smell and high skill with thrown weapons are actually common traits of his old house, House Arabian. He asks if there's anything else. Turan stays quiet for a second, then notices Kyorn's expression. He asks if something is wrong. Kyorn's warm smile completely vanishes. His face goes deadly pale, his eyes widening in absolute silent horror. He looks at Turan, his voice shaking, saying he thinks he knows exactly which house Turan's abilities belong to. Turan looks at him, totally confused by the sudden heavy atmosphere, asking which house it is. They stand by the open door of the cabin, the shadow of the roof completely covering Kyorn's face. Kyorn says it's a legendary, feared noble house. A house of ruthless killers, famously known across the entire empire as the Pursuers, or the Hunters. The exact same house that completely massacred Kyorn's entire family, his friends, and his comrades in the war. House Zahar. And the screen cuts to black on Turan's face, his eyes wide in absolute terrifying shock. Our guy is staring at Kyorn, and his brain is probably running at 1,000,000 frames per second. He is realizing that the legendary ruthless bloodline flowing through his own veins belongs to the exact people who slaughtered Kyorn's entire family. He's literally standing there asking himself if he needs to apologize for crimes committed by relatives he has never even met. He swallows hard, bracing himself for the worst as Kyorn says his name. But instead of drawing his sword, Kyorn just places a heavy, warm hand on Turan's shoulder and tells him to stop looking so worried. He reminds Turan that he was not the one fighting in that war. He is just a kid who grew up on a mountain herding sheep. He says this is an adult situation, and if humanity keeps trying to wash blood with blood, the cycle of revenge will never actually end. Turan looks at him, completely quiet for a second, and asks if Kyorn has any regrets. Specifically, regrets about telling our guy to go down the mountain. Because let's be real, if Turan actually descends this hill to pursue power, his bloodline dictates he will eventually be forced to join House Zahar. Kyorn looks at him and says he trusts Turan's character. He trusts the pure goodness of a kid who risked his entire hidden identity and broke his mother's deathbed promise just to save a wandering old knight. He says that if someone with Turan's heart rises to a high position within House Zahar, maybe they can prevent another horrific war from ever happening again. Kyorn shrugs, breaking the heavy mood, and says there's no point in stressing about it right now since nothing is set in stone. But Turan's expression changes. He looks at Kyorn, smiles, and says his mind is completely clear now. He wants to go down the mountain. Kyorn smiles back, telling him he's made a wise choice, but says he shouldn't rush it. Turan says he'll wait to pack his bags until Kyorn's wounds are completely healed. Kyorn tries to act tough, claiming it's just a scratch, but we all saw that deep slice earlier. They head back inside. The next phase of training is officially starting. Kyorn sits down and begins explaining the fundamentals of magic. He says to use any spell, you absolutely need mana, which is why people call it the key to omnipotence. Turan listens carefully. Kyorn notes that it's not actually omnipotent, because your mana pool has to perfectly match the complexity of the spell you're casting. Turan asks how a wizard actually measures that balance. Kyorn holds up 3 fingers, explaining that the overall difficulty of any magic is determined by 3 main pillars: bloodline, affinity, and causality. Bloodline is the genetic cheat code. It's the unique power you are naturally born with, which is why purebred nobles are so ridiculously overpowered. He points out that Tehran can't easily use magic to heal his side wound right now, but for the Revista bloodline in the south, healing severe injuries is as natural as breathing even without a single day of training. Tehran asks about the second pillar, affinity. Tehran realizes affinity is basically familiarity. It's why he was able to launch a highly controlled fireball on his first try, simply because he visualized it as throwing a rock. Kyorn nods, confirming that if Tehran had just tried to conjure raw fire without that physical throwing concept, it would have failed completely. Then Kyorn points to his cup, saying the last and most important pillar is causality, and even he doesn't fully understand its limits. He asks Tehran what would happen if he tried to kill someone directly using raw, formless mana pressure. Kyorn waves his hand over the water mug, causing sparks of light to flicker. He explains that when you try to achieve an excessively difficult outcome without providing a logical physical cause, the magic just fizzles out as useless light. Tehran leans back, his sharp mind already putting the pieces of the puzzle together. He says that if he wanted to kill an enemy, instead of just wishing them dead with raw mana, he has to provide a logical cause of death, like creating a physical stone projectile or a roaring fire. Kyorn literally slaps the table in excitement, telling Tehran he's so smart he should have been a scholar instead of a mage. But Tehran drops a sneaky question. If that's true, why can he easily control normal sheep with his voice without any physical cause, while magical beasts ignore it? Kyorn explains that normal animals have no mana, so they have no resistance to direct conceptual commands. Tehran realizes that being an elite wizard isn't just about having a massive mana pool, it's about deeply understanding the scientific laws behind it. Then Tehran asks if the Zahar bloodline has any specific signature magic. Kyorn tells him they specialize in untraceable stealth and sensory tracking. Kyorn stands up and tells him to try activating it right now. Tehran closes his eyes, focusing on the core concept of wanting to remain completely hidden from the world, wishing that neither his footsteps nor his scent can be detected. His mana starts flowing, wrapping around his body like a quiet, chilly mist. Kyorn blinks, looking around the small cabin. The air goes completely still. And just like that, Tehran is gone. He is standing right there, but his physical presence has completely vanished from Kyorn's senses. Kyorn's eyes widen. It's a perfect execution of Zahar's stealth on the first attempt. Tehran deactivates the spell, looking down at his hand, completely fascinated by how natural it felt. Kyorn admits that seeing it with his own eyes is terrifying, but warns him that stealth is not invincible against high-sensory mages. But more than anything, seeing Tehran learn so fast makes Kyorn genuinely proud. It's a wholesome mentor-student bond. But all good things must come to an end. A few days later, Kyorn's wounds are healed, and it's time to pack up. Tehran is officially ready to leave his mountain home behind. We cut to the local village where the chief's face is completely twisted in absolute shock and horror. He screams at Tehran, asking how he can just decide to sell all his sheep and abandon the village without consulting the elders first. Tehran looks at him with the most glorious, ice-cold, not-my-problem expression, telling the chief they should figure out how to find a new shepherd themselves. He casually tells them he expects a fair price for the flock, otherwise he'll just open the gates, release all the sheep into the wild, and walk away. He notes that they can try to capture them all manually, but they'll probably have a miserable time doing it. The chief is sweating bullets, gritting his teeth, realizing this kid is an absolute menace who will 100% keep his word. There is zero profit in irritating him. He grumbles, tossing over a heavy bag of coins, telling Tehran to do whatever the hell he wants. Shakedown successful. Tehran walks down the path with Kyorn, carrying his backpack and his newly acquired bag of travel funds. Tehran notes that the villagers still technically owe Kyorn a bounty reward for slaying the shadow leopard, asking if they should go back and collect that too. Kyorn smiles, saying he had no intention of taking money from poor peasants, and reminds Tehran that he was the one who actually caught the beast anyway. They reach the main crossroads at the base of the mountain, and this is where their paths officially split. Kyorn apologizes for refusing Tehran's offer to travel together, admitting he's just more comfortable traveling alone in his old age. Tehran smiles warmly, thanking him for absolutely everything he's taught him over the last few days. Kyorn closes his eyes, telling his star student to take care of himself out there. Tehran says he hopes they can meet again soon with smiling faces. Our guy stands on the path, watching the old knight's broad back fade into the morning mist, and only much later would Tehran truly understand why he didn't want Kyorn to speak to him with formal noble etiquette, because even though his mother loved him fiercely, growing up without a father meant he had secretly been yearning for a strong male role model his entire life. Someone who could show him what kind of man he should strive to become. The scene transitions, the wind whistling across a completely different landscape. We are now in a barren, cracked canyon wasteland. Tehran is walking alone through the desert gorge, his white cloak hood pulled low over his head. He raises his hand to shield his eyes from the blinding dust and wind. Suddenly, his sharp Zahar senses perk up. He spots a group of 4 hooded travelers pushing a wooden cart loaded with barrels through the canyon. He decides this is the perfect opportunity to get his bearings. He walks up, standing in the middle of the path to ask for directions. The leader, a scarred man with a black eye patch, demands to know who he is. Tehran politely explains he's traveling alone and asks for the direction of the nearest city. The eye patch man tells him that if he keeps following this road, he'll eventually reach a city called Murray. Tehran smiles, thanking him. He turns to walk away, completely satisfied with this quick interaction, but the leader steps forward, blocking his path with a heavy boot. A creepy, hunchback bandit steps out from behind the cart, grinning like a goblin, asking if our guy really thought he could just get free information and leave. He sneers, telling Tehran that in the wasteland, if you receive something, you have to pay the tax. Clang. Instantly, all 4 men draw their swords, surrounding our guy in a tight circle. The goblin-looking bandit tells him to drop his heavy backpack, while Tehran dryly asks if they're supposed to be bandits. The eye patch leader chuckles, saying they can call it recklessness, and reminds him that this is a lawless wasteland where people disappear every day. He presses the tip of his steel sword right against Tehran's neck, telling him to drop his cloak and bag while they're still being nice, because killing him would get unnecessarily messy. Tehran looks at the cold steel, his expression going completely blank. He whispers to himself, bandits who actually kill people. We flash back to his magic training session with Kiorn by the fireplace. Tehran remembers how natural the causality of fire felt when he launched it at the corpse puppet. Tehran's mouth twists into a cold, terrifying smile under his hood, telling the bandits he guess he'll just have to use them for target practice. We open right on that cold, menacing smirk. This is the exact moment these bandits realize they picked the wrong lobby to spawn camp. The bandit leader literally snorts in disbelief. They start bursting out laughing, mocking him, saying this crazy country kid is talking like he's some kind of high and mighty wizard. Tehran doesn't say a word, he just casually lowers his right hand, finger flicking the air. He speaks a single, quiet command, wind. Instantly, a massive, violent hurricane vortex of green air erupts from his hand, sending all 4 bandits flying backward. Tehran notes to himself that instead of just forcing wind out of thin air, physically shaping and amplifying it with his hand uses practically 0 mana. The bandits crash hard into the dirt, coughing up dust, completely terrified, realizing they are actually fighting a real wizard. Tehran casually reaches for his leather water flask, unscrewing the cap. He manipulates the water droplets, freezing them into a razor-sharp, jagged ice shard hovering in the air. He extends his hand, aiming the floating ice spike directly at the leader. The bandit's eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror. Whoosh! With a flick of his wrist, the ice shard splits the air, piercing straight through the bandit's shoulder and pinning him to the ground. Tehran looks at his hand, totally unimpressed, noting that this ice spell is kind of mid compared to just throwing stones with his sling, which feels way faster and stronger. The bleeding leader drops his sword, crawling backward, begging the esteemed wizard to forgive them just this once. He screams that they'll give him all their money, while the other 3 bandits secretly creep up behind Tehran's back with their weapons raised high. But Tehran doesn't even bother turning around, he just taps his heel on the ground. Bam! A massive, violent shockwave of earth magic erupts from beneath the sand, sending jagged stone pillars slamming upward. The leader's face goes completely pale. The 3 sneak attackers are instantly obliterated, their bodies left hanging lifelessly on the rock spires. Tehran stands beneath the shadows of his own creation, looking like an absolute demon. He walks up to the kneeling leader, looking down, asking him one simple question. Why did they decide to attack him so recklessly without a proper plan? He could have easily been an elite wizard traveler. The bandit trembles, swallowing hard, and says it's because Tehran bowed his head. He explains that because Tehran greeted them so politely and bowed even when they spoke rudely, they automatically assumed he was just a weak, defenseless commoner. Tehran's eyes go wide. He smiles, thanking the bandit for teaching him a highly valuable lesson about how this cruel world actually operates. Note to self, being too nice gets you killed. The eye patch bandit starts crying, asking if he's really going to spare his life now. Tehran just looks at him as a single cold drop of ice water hovers directly above the bandit's forehead. We flash back to Kiorn's final warning in the cabin. Kiorn had looked at him, completely serious, telling him to never show a single shred of mercy to scum like bandits who harm others for profit. He pointed to his heavy steel sword on the table. Kiorn warned him that a life spared out of pity today could easily end up destroying 10 good lives tomorrow. Back in the present, splat, the bandit stops breathing. Tehran turns his back, walking away from the bloody canyon, adjusting his backpack. He walks along the dry dirt road, staring at the clear wheel tracks left by the bandit's cart cutting across the sand. The empty silence of the desert leaves one heavy, burning realization in his mind. He just killed human beings for the first time. He felt a pang of guilt, but he knew he couldn't let them go, because Kiorn's words echoed in his soul. Those men would have easily slaughtered the next innocent traveler without a second thought. Like dusty tracks slowly fading as weeds grow over them, Turan's chaotic heart gradually settles as he accepts the brutal nature of survival. And then, he reaches the end of the canyon, stepping out into a vast, open green plain. His eyes widen in genuine wonder as he lets out a quiet gasp. Nestled between the massive mountains is Murray, a beautiful, sprawling city with towering white spires and structured stone streets. He walks through the heavy stone gates, watching a little girl holding her mother's hand. He looks around the crowded marketplace, totally overwhelmed, realizing this is the first time in his life he's ever seen so many people in one place. He stares up at the massive cathedrals, realizing the advanced architecture is completely different from his simple village. He takes a deep breath, smiling, realizing he has officially entered the civilized world. He walks up to a local fruit stand loaded with red apples, calling out to the vendor. The vendor welcomes him warmly, asking what he can get him, but Turan politely raises his hand and says he's not actually a customer. We flash back to Kjorn's advice: if you ever get lost in a new city, just look for the local inn, because they exist in literally every town. But back at the stand, the vendor's friendly expression instantly twists into a furious scowl, yelling at Turan to get lost if he's not buying anything. Turan walks away, totally bewildered, wondering if there's some unspoken city law that says you have to buy fruit before you're allowed to ask a basic question. He walks back to the stand, points at a red apple, and asks how much it costs. The vendor grunts, 2 dupit. Turan pulls out his coin pouch. The vendor notes he looks like an outsider, so paying with foreign silver is fine too. Turan hands over the coin, and now that he's paid the question tax, the vendor instantly cooperates, pointing him straight down the road behind the cloak shop to the big inn with the blue roof. Turan follows the directions, arriving in front of a massive wooden sign that reads Pub and Inn. He opens the door and is greeted by a cute, short-haired blonde girl named Lena with a deceptively warm smile. She flirts with him instantly, calling him a handsome guest, while Turan awkwardly scratches his cheek and asks how much for a night. She clasps her hands, chirping, 16 dupit. Turan doesn't even hesitate, handing over the money. As she takes the cash, Turan slides another small bag of coins across the counter, saying there's something he wants to ask. Lena looks at the money, curious. Turan asks if there are any high-tier monsters nearby with a heavy bounty on them, because he needs to hunt them down to absorb their mana and make some traveling money. Lena's smile turns extremely wide as she clutches the extra coin, realizing this pretty boy is an absolute goldmine of easy cash. She giggles, telling him there's no such thing as free info in this town, but since he paid, she'll guide him. She points out that monster bounties are handled directly by City Hall. Turan blinks, looking completely lost, asking what a City Hall is. Lena leans over the wooden bar, staring at him in disbelief, laughing that he must be from the absolute middle of nowhere. She explains that City Hall is where public officials employed by the city's lord handle all official mercenary affairs. She notes it's already closed since the sun is down, so he'll have to check it out tomorrow morning. She asks if he's a monster hunter too, and Turan, being a naive country boy, asks what a monster hunter is. Lena explains that normal commoners believe that if an ordinary human slays enough monsters, they can eventually awaken as a powerful wizard. Suddenly, a heavy, calloused hand slams onto Turan's shoulder from behind. A large, cocky mercenary named Midan laughs, saying it's a real fact and he's seen people awaken with his own eyes. Lena gasps, asking Midan if he's actually still alive. Midan boasts that he's not dying until he officially becomes a wizard. He slaps Turan's back, apologizing for the rough greeting. Our guy looks totally annoyed by the sudden physical contact. Turan turns around, asking Midan to explain more about how a commoner can become a wizard by hunting. Lena chimes in, saying that since real wizards get stronger by absorbing monster mana, commoners believe the same principle applies to them. Midden points to his 3 grinning squad mates, saying the 4 of them are currently hunting local beasts to achieve that dream. Turan asks if anyone in their squad has actually awakened yet. Midan laughs, saying no way, because in this entire city, there are only the Lord's wizard and 3 apprentice knights under him. Midan looks Turan up and down, noting his gear is way too shabby and asking if he even has a weapon. Turan quietly pulls out his worn leather sling. Midan inspects it, noting it's well used and could probably hunt small rabbits or foxes, but nothing serious. He grins, saying they actually need 1 more ranged shooter for their next hunt, and asks Turan if he wants to join their squad. Turan cracks a polite, dismissive smile and says no, thank you. Later that night, Turan is lying flat on his back on his comfortable inn bed, staring at the ceiling. He lets out a long sigh, thinking about what a chaotic, exhausting day it's been. He looks at his heavy travel pack sitting in the corner, still unable to believe he actually left his peaceful mountain behind. He raises his hand, channeling a quiet, crackling stream of blue mana across his knuckles, wondering what his future holds. Suddenly, a soft, polite knock rattles his wooden door. Tehran sits up, asking who it is. We flash back to Kyorn's advice as they walk through the forest. Kyorn had warned him that even inside a civilized city inn, you can never afford to let your guard down. Tehran had nodded, promising to keep his senses sharp at all times. Back in the dark room, Tehran quietly channels a highly volatile, glowing vortex of lightning magic into his hand as he approaches the door. He slowly cracks the door open, keeping his body tensed for an ambush. His sharp gray eye locks onto the visitor. It's Lena. She smiles warmly, asking if he was already asleep. Tehran stands there, looking completely confused as she steps inside. Lena blush smiles, slowly reaching for the dark bow of her dress to untie it. Our guy is standing in the doorway, staring down at her, totally unresponsive. She steps closer, telling him that for a tiny amount of money, she is willing to do absolutely anything he wants. She slides her hand onto his shoulder, whispering that she can tell exactly what he's thinking just by looking at his face. But instead of falling for the trap, Tehran literally activates his ultimate mental defense. He transforms his entire face into a flat, emotionless, enlightened stone Buddha. Lena's face completely drops. She is staring at him like she just encountered a sleep paralysis demon, the absolute mood killer of the century. And we immediately find out why our guy is so thoroughly brickwalled. We flash back to Kyorn screaming in his head at the absolute top of his lungs. Kyorn was yelling at him to always, under any circumstances, be extremely careful around city maids and fast women. He warned him that most of them carry terrible urban diseases, and while high-tier mages have strong resistance, they can still pass it on to others. He told him to never let cheap desire trap him into doing something he'll regret. Lena stomps down the stairs, completely furious that her easy payday failed. Tehran lies back down on his bed, reflecting on how cold-hearted the city is. First the fruit vendor, now the inn maid. Literally everything has a price tag attached. But then, his sharp Zahar ears pick up a conversation drifting from the wooden hallway stairs outside. Midan's squad is walking up, and one of his guys is asking Midan why he tried so hard to recruit Tehran earlier. He notes the kid looked weak and useless. The guy jokes that Tehran has a cocky mouth, so he'd probably only be useful as emergency monster bait. But Midan's expression goes soft. He says he wanted to bring him along because the kid reminded him of himself when he was young and naive. He admits that seeing a skinny kid wandering around with nothing but a leather sling made him genuinely worry. He figured if the kid stayed close, he'd survive longer. The squad mate laughs, telling Midan he is way too good-hearted for his own good. Tehran listens to them walk away, a soft, genuine smile spreading across his face. He decides that maybe the city isn't completely cold-hearted after all. The next morning, Tehran heads down to the Murray City Hall, a large, structured wooden building with a massive bounty board out front. He walks up to the wooden counter, where a mustache-wearing clerk is casually organizing paperwork and asks how he can help. Tehran asks if he is a city official, and the clerk sighs, asking if he looks like anything else. Tehran ignores the attitude and says he's here to hunt monsters. We flash back to Kyorn's final lesson. He told Tehran that the civilized world will never be kind to him for no reason. He said that if you want ordinary people to treat you kindly and bow their heads, the method is incredibly simple. You just have to reveal that you are a powerful wizard. Otherwise, you're just another peasant to them. Back at the desk, the clerk slides a sheet of paper across the counter. He tells Tehran he's not allowed to take the sheet with him, so he has to look at it and hand it right back. Tehran looks at the crude drawing on the paper, asking if it's a crow monster. The clerk dryly asks if it looks like a cat to him. The clerk warns him that if he actually manages to kill one, he has to bring the corpse back immediately, because if he leaves the mana to rot, it will turn into a wraith. He notes that leaving a dead beast to rot is highly illegal and punishable by death, though he doubts a kid like him needs to worry about that. He tells him that real knights maintain public order, while hunting dangerous monsters like this is left to expendable thugs. He basically tells Tehran to get lost and not get himself killed. Tehran just looks at the drawing, memorizing the shape of the beast. We cut to a few hours later. The heavy front doors of the city hall creak open, and Tehran walks in, dragging the massive, fully intact corpse of the Blade Crow behind him. The entire lobby goes dead silent. The clerks are staring with wide eyes, completely frozen. The main clerk is trembling, stammering out, Did you actually kill this thing alone?" Tehran looks at him, totally calm, and says yes, asking how he collects the bounty. The clerk can't even process what he's looking at. The beast's razor-sharp blade wings are completely intact, which is practically impossible for commoner hunters. He looks at this quiet, skinny kid, realizes he is standing in front of a literal monster. He quickly panics, stammering that they will prepare his payout immediately. He hands over a massive, heavy pouch of silver coins, telling Tehran he must have worked incredibly hard and should go get some rest. Tehran takes the money, but instead of leaving, he looks back at the bounty list. He asks if there are any other high-tier monsters in the area worth hunting. The clerk's jaw literally drops. He looks at Tehran like he's a complete lunatic. He stammers, "Don't tell me You can actually hunt more of them right now? We cut to the inn where the table is loaded with a massive, luxurious feast of premium ham, cheese, and soup. Lena is serving him, her face full of absolute shock, screaming that he defeated 30 high-tier monsters in just 3 days. Turan is sitting there, happily stuffing his face, chewing on a piece of ham. He casually tells her that making money wasn't his only goal for this hunt. We see a montage of Turan standing over dozens of dead beast carcasses, absorbing their glowing green mana. He reflects on how his mana reserves have increased severalfold compared to when he first met Kjorn, but he admits to himself that he's starting to hit a hard limit. Weak monsters don't give enough XP anymore, so he needs to find stronger prey to keep growing. Lena looks down, blushing, starting to say something soft. But before she can finish, a heavy hand grabs Turan by the back of his collar, pulling him back. It's two of Midan's rough-looking squad mates. They sneer, asking if he's enjoying all this tasty food by himself. The leader, an arrogant guy with a smirk, calls him a skinny runt. He says they heard he's been making a ridiculous amount of money lately and asks how about sharing some of that charity with his local partners. Turan doesn't even blink. He just stares at the hand gripping his coat. And then, he moves. Bam! With blinding speed, Turan unleashes a massive, lightning-fast palm strike directly into the guy's jaw. The guy gets sent flying backward, blood spraying as he crashes into the wooden tables. His friend screams in shock. Turan casually dusts off his sleeve, asking if they wanted some charity. The second mercenary loses his mind, lunging forward with a heavy, tensed fist, screaming at him to not get cocky. Turan easily slips under the punch, his gray eyes cold as ice, and drives a brutal counter elbow straight into the man's ribs. The guy collapses in agonizing pain. The first mercenary struggles to his feet, grabbing a wooden chair to smash over Turan's head. Turan just stands there, calmly raising his left hand, blocking the flying chair with a single reinforced palm. He grips the edge of the chair, his mana pressure locking the man in place. The mercenary is sweating bullets, unable to move a single inch. Crack. Turan releases a sudden burst of kinetic wind, shattering the chair and sending the mercenary crashing into the floor. Lena is cowering behind the bar, her face completely pale. She screams at the top of her lungs, "Don't fight in the HEINN." Suddenly, the front door swings open, and Midan steps in. He looks at his beaten teammates, then immediately bows his head in a deep, formal apology. Turan deactivates his magic, standing in the doorway as Midan says he gave both of them a proper scolding. Midan stays bowed, admitting they've been incredibly tight on money lately, and guesses his guys got jealous when they saw Turan making bank. He yells at his two bruised mates to apologize right now, and they quietly stammer out an apology. Turan looks at Midan, asking if things are really that hard for them. Midan sighs, admitting they are. He confesses that if they don't find a bounty in the next 3 days, they won't even be able to pay the inn's room fee. Turan reaches into his cloak, pulling out a heavy pouch of silver coins, and tosses it directly to Midan. Midan catches it, completely stunned, asking why he is doing this. Turan says this is repayment for the kindness Midan showed him earlier when he worried about his safety, but he reminds him there's no such thing as a free lunch. He tells Midan to give him some information about the surrounding cities in exchange. Midan's face lights up, boasting that info is his specialty. The next morning, Turan leaves the gates of Murray behind, the morning sun shining over the city roofs. He stands on the dirt road, reflecting that this will likely be his last hunt in this area. Midan gave him detailed information about a major city nearby, so it's time for him to move on. He thinks to himself that the info was actually incredibly useful and decides that Midan really was a pure and good-hearted person. He notes that while Midan didn't feel as seasoned or wise as Kjorn, his naive kindness was genuinely refreshing. Suddenly, Turan's eyes snap wide open. His sharp Zahar sense of smell detects the thick, metallic scent of fresh blood drifting from the nearby woods. He launches himself forward, sprinting through the trees, praying that his gut feeling is wrong. He stops, running his hand over a giant tree trunk that has been shredded by massive deep claw marks. He steps into a quiet clearing, and his heart sinks. He finds one of Midan's squadmates sitting against a tree, his body completely covered in blood, lifeless. He walks closer, staring at the horrific wounds, confirming the man is dead. He looks around, realizing this is indeed Midan's group. He hears a faint, painful groan from the bushes. He spots a trail of blood drops on the dirt. He rushes over and finds Midan lying on the ground, his face completely pale, his armor shredded, barely clinging to life. Turan is kneeling over Midan, his expression deeply serious, demanding to know what monster did this to them. Midan's eyes are glazed over, blood dripping down his forehead as he weakly stammers out a single word, "Ra." Turan leans closer, and Midan coughs up blood, whispering, "Rabbit." Turan's eyes narrow in confusion. A rabbit? Suddenly, a low, guttural growl echoes from the dark shadows of the trees behind him. Tehran whips his head around. Standing over the corpse of another squad mate is a horrifying, giant, mutated white rabbit with glowing blood-red eyes and razor-sharp fangs dripping with gore. Tehran slowly stands up, his gray eyes turning cold as he locks his focus on the beast. Whoosh! With terrifying speed, the mutated rabbit launches itself forward like a bullet, claws outstretched to tear him apart. Tehran barely manages to dodge, the wind of the beast's attack whipping his silver hair. He grits his teeth, shocked by its sheer velocity. The giant rabbit lands, tearing up the dirt, turning around to face him again. Tehran realizes he almost got hit. He quickly reaches for his leather sling, winding it up with rapid speed. He loads a stone, channeling his conceptual magic, harden, speed, pierce. He fires a supersonic kinetic projectile directly at the rabbit's head. The stone tears through the air, but the rabbit casually whips its massive armor-plated ears forward. Clang. The stone shatters against the rabbit's ears like glass. Tehran is stunned. This beast is actually built to defend against ranged projectiles. He realizes he can't rely on simple snipes this time. He needs to close the distance. The rabbit digs its claws into the dirt, preparing for another explosive leap. It launches itself high into the air, casts a shadow over Tehran as it prepares to crush him. Its red eyes flare with raw, murderous intent. But Tehran is already gone. He activates his Zahar stealth magic, his physical presence completely vanishing from the rabbit's sight. The rabbit crashes hard into the empty dirt path, completely confused, looking around. Suddenly, Tehran materializes directly above the beast's head, falling from the sky with a sharp stone in his hand. He drives the reinforced stone directly into the rabbit's neck. The beast lets out a horrifying, high-pitched scream of pain as blood sprays. Tehran kicks off the rabbit's back, flipping gracefully through the air to distance himself. The rabbit goes completely berserk, thrashing through the woods, shattering branches in a blind rage. Tehran lands on a branch, tracking its movements, and prepares his final blow. He launches himself down, channeling a massive, concentrated vortex of kinetic wind mana around his fist. Bam! He drives his fists straight into the rabbit's skull, the impact shaking the entire forest floor. The giant beast's head is driven deep into the dirt, its skull completely shattered. The mutated rabbit twitches once, then goes completely limp. The fight is over. Tehran stands over the massive white corpse, his breathing heavy but controlled. He extends his hand and a massive, dense vortex of glowing green mana starts rising from the rabbit's body. He absorbs it, and his eyes instantly flare with a bright green light. The mana density of this mutated beast is incredibly thick, far stronger than the shadow leopard. His veins burn as the energy floods his system. He clenches his fist, feeling his mana reserves expanding to a completely new level. He walks back to Medan, who is staring at him with wide, blood-stained eyes. Medan's voice is trembling as he weakly whispers, "You're a wizard." Tehran kneels beside him, keeping his head low, not denying it. Medan tears up, asking why a powerful wizard like him was hiding out on a mountain. Tehran doesn't answer, instead gently asking if there is any family or loved ones he wants him to deliver his belongings to. Medan smiles weakly, shaking his head, saying he has nobody. His eyes start to drift close as he whispers his final words, thanking Tehran for being his friend. Tehran remembers Medan's excited voice from the night before, telling him about a great city nearby called Orem. Medan had told him Orem has a legendary library containing thousands of ancient magic books. Medan had laughed, saying that was the first time Tehran actually looked interested in anything, but he warned him that only official wizards are allowed to enter the library. Tehran looks at Medan's peaceful, lifeless face. He stands up, looking out over the quiet forest. He has made his decision. He digs 4 neat graves in the clearing, burying Medan and his squad mates under the shade of the trees. He stands before Medan's grave, saying he is heading to that great city of Orem. He says he hopes Medan can finally rest in peace. We cut to a few days later. Tehran is walking along a paved stone road, a massive white stone city wall rising in front of him. He looks up at the towering spires, thinking he's almost embarrassed that he was so shocked by the small city of Murray. This place is on a completely different scale. This is Great City Orem, a massive metropolis dominated by Gothic stone castles and manicured luxury gardens. Tehran joins the long queue of travelers waiting at the massive steel gates. He notices the guards are conducting highly thorough, strict security screenings on every single person trying to enter. He notes that, as expected of a great city, the social system here is far more established and strict. He steps up to the gate, but a guard suddenly blocks him with a heavy spear, yelling, "Halt!" Tehran looks at him, and the guard points a finger at his face, saying, "No entry." The guard sneers, saying he has never seen clothes that filthy in his entire life, and tells Tehran to go stand in the corner and at least dust himself off before trying to enter their clean city. Turan complies, entering the city shortly after. He stands in the main square, staring up at a colossal vine-wrapped white tower that touches the clouds. He realizes this is the legendary Voltus Tower library Midan talked about. The scale of the building is completely overwhelming. He realizes it must have been constructed using high-level ancient magic. He walks up the grand marble stairs, approaching the massive gold-embossed blue doors, but two formal guards step forward. They look at his simple clothes, telling him this library is strictly off-limits to commoners and only official wizards can enter. Turan looks them dead in the eye and says, "I'm a wizard." The lead guard's face contorts in fury. He steps closer, yelling, "Do you want to die for impersonating a wizard?" He raises his leather-gloved hand, preparing to violently push Turan down the marble stairs, saying there's no way a beggar like him is a wizard. But before his hand can touch Turan's chest, Turan's silver eyes suddenly flash with a terrifying blood-red light. We flash back to Kiorn's teachings. Kiorn told him that mages can instantly recognize each other by sensing the other's mana pressure. Turan focuses, releasing a fraction of his true mana. Boom. A massive suffocating wave of crimson gold mana pressure explodes from his body, the raw gravity of his presence shattering the stone tiles around his feet. The guard is instantly crushed to his knees, clutching his chest, panting heavily as the sheer weight of Turan's mana suffocates him. The second guard rushes over, panicking, asking if he's all right. The lead guard struggles to breathe, looking up in absolute sheer terror. He realizes this kid is no ordinary mage. The density of his mana is at least noble class or higher. He quickly stands up, bowing deeply, stammering that his name is Kenya, a knight of House Voltus, and asks which great noble house Turan belongs to. Turan casually asks if he needs to reveal his house just to enter the library. Kenya quickly says no, but he explains that to access the inner sanctum of the library, he technically needs official permission from the master of House Voltas. He says he will contact the house immediately to arrange an audience. Turan lets out a soft sigh, thinking this was supposed to be a simple process. Turan is escorted inside the Voltas estate. We see a clean maid gently preparing a warm towel. Turan is sitting in a massive, luxurious marble bath filled with hot water and rose petals. 4 maids are standing around him, gently washing his hair and shoulders. Turan is blushing furiously, looking completely overwhelmed. He turns his head, awkwardly telling them to stop and let him wash himself. But the lead maid clasps her hands, pleading with him, saying that if they fail to properly serve an esteemed guest of House Valtas, they will be severely punished. Turan sighs, telling them to just do whatever they want. They happily cheer. A few minutes later, one of the maids walks out of the dressing room, her face completely flushed, gasping, "Wow, amazing!" Turan walks out, wearing a highly tailored, pristine black and gold noble coat that perfectly fits his lean frame. He adjusts his collar, looking incredibly sharp and handsome, and asks if there is something on his face. The maids bow their heads in panic, apologizing, saying they momentarily lost themselves because of his incredible beauty. Turan smiles, telling them there's nothing to forgive. He speaks to them with his usual polite, casual tone, but the lead maid quickly begs him to not speak so casually to simple servants like them, as it's improper for a noble. Suddenly, a clear, confident voice echoes from the hallway, "Wow, what's this?" Turan turns his head, looking toward the grand entrance of the parlor room. Walking into the room is a beautiful young girl with long, wavy pink hair, freckles, and a mischievous grin flanked by a massive muscular bodyguard. She giggles, saying she heard a guest showed up looking like a complete beggar, but notes that after washing him up, he looks like a literal prince. Turan introduces himself as Turan. The girl smiles, introducing herself as Azella Voltas. She asks which house he belongs to. Turan looks down, saying that for personal reasons, it's difficult for him to say. Azella's eyes narrow, her smile turning incredibly sharp. She says that's a massive shame. She thinks to herself that if he is hiding his identity, then she is going to play a little prank to force his hand. Boom. Instantly, a massive, explosive pillar of crimson fire mana erupts from Azella's body, shattering the glass windows and shaking the entire palace floor. Her eyes glow with a wild golden light as she smiles like a maniac. She locks her eyes onto Turan, screaming at him to show her his real mana. Turan doesn't even flinch. His gray eye turns sharp as he immediately counterchannels a cold, blindingly bright blue defensive barrier. The clash of their elements is so violent it forms a massive, glowing mandala pattern on the floor, shaking the entire room's foundations. The massive bodyguard immediately dives in, shielding the maids as the shockwave of the clash rips across the parlor. The residual energy crackles and fades into the ceiling, leaving nothing but dust and hot air. Turan lets out a soft, tensed breath, dropping his hands, completely unbothered by the fact that he was almost cooked. Azella's jaw is practically on the floor. Her grin goes from mischievous to completely fascinated. She stares at her trembling hands, her heart racing from the sheer density of the mana Turan just used to neutralize her fire. She steps closer, looking at him like she just rolled a 5-star character on her first gacha pull. And then she casually asks him, "Hey, do you want to marry me?" Our guy goes completely blank. His brain has officially left the chat. He stands there, sweat dropping, wondering if this noble girl is completely out of her mind. Azella bursts out laughing, clapping her hands, claiming she was just joking, while her bodyguard looks completely embarrassed by her antics. She gives him a highly suggestive wink, saying that the seat next to her is still empty if he ever changes his mind. She waves goodbye, walking out of the room with her massive guard in tow, leaving Turan standing there in the middle of the empty parlor. Turan stays quiet, looking down at his hand. His fingers are still tingling from the residual mana heat. He realizes that if his current power is considered average or normal among Orum's high-tier nobles, he has a ridiculously long way to go to reach the top. The scene transitions to a massive, gold-embossed crest of House Valtas hanging on the wall. Later that afternoon, Turan is escorted into a lavish, book-lined study room to meet the Lord of the City. Sitting behind a massive wooden desk is Lug Valtas, the Lord of Orum, looking exceptionally calm and calculating. Turan introduces himself. Lug wastes zero time, getting straight to the point and asking if Turan really wants to access the secure tower library. He warns Turan that many travelers come here chasing fake myths and tells him up front that there is no ancient ultimate magic hidden in that library. Turan says that's completely fine, as he never expected that anyway. Lug smiles, saying that in that case, he has no reason to deny him entry since there are no family secrets inside. He tells Turan it's getting late, so he should rest up and they will organize his entry pass tomorrow. Turan politely bows, thanking him for his generosity. The next morning, Turan stands at the base of the colossal, vine-wrapped White Tower Library. The two gatekeepers from yesterday bow deeply, welcoming the esteemed guests to the Sky Library. Talk about a complete 180 in attitude. The massive gold-plated doors slowly creak open, letting a bright beam of sunlight cut through the dusty air. Turan steps inside, his eyes widening in genuine awe. Rising up to the sky is a massive, endless spiral staircase lined with millions of ancient books. He walks up, the scale of the tower making him feel completely microscopic. He reaches the main research floor, looking at the long rows of reading tables. Suddenly, a cheeky, high-pitched voice behind him yells, "Welcome to the library, Lord Turan." Turan whips his head around and sees a tiny, pale-skinned girl with long, flowing black hair floating in midair, wearing oversized white robes. She introduces herself as the librarian, saying she is here by order of the head of the house to explain the rules. Turan looks at her, sweat dropping, completely confused by the fact that the high security keeper of ancient knowledge is a literal child. The rules are simple: don't break anything, and don't steal. She floats right up to his face, pointing a finger, saying she will be watching his every single move. Turan awkwardly tells her to back off because she is being a bit intense. He walks through the shelves, asking if she has read all the books here too. She happily boasts that finding anything is her job. She floats around his head, teasingly asking what he wants to read: romance, history, or since he's a young man, erotica? Turan's flat-faced Buddha mental defense is working overtime right now. He deadpans, saying he just wants to learn some basic common knowledge about how this world actually works. Whoosh! With a wave of her sleeve, she telekinetically summons a massive pile of heavy leather books, landing them neatly on the table. She warns him that most of these are centuries old, but says this specific section should have exactly what he needs. Turan thanks her. He sits down at the long wooden table, picking up the first book. He runs his hand over the strange runes on the cover, thinking that this is what civilized people call a book. He flips the fragile parchment pages, his eyes darting across the ancient text and maps. And as he starts reading, his expression goes from curious to completely tensed. He whisper gasps, "This is incredible." A silent montage plays. Turan repeats the exact same routine every single day, spending hours in the library reading under the soft tower light. For the first time, he finally understands the world's geography, the balance of power, the different races, and the ancient customs of mages. He reads about the high-tier magical beasts and the lost advanced technological relics of the old empire. He absorbs the information like a sponge, his analytical Zahar mind storing every single detail. He realizes that the world, which once felt like a terrifying blank void of unknowns, is finally becoming crystal clear. A few days later, Lord Lug summons him back to the main study room. He notes he hears Tehran has been making excellent use of the library. Lug leans forward, his tone turning highly businesslike. He reminds Tehran that granting him access to the tower was an act of goodwill, and now, he says, he wants to collect on that goodwill. Our guy knew there was no way this politician was giving out free library passes. Lug explains that a highly dangerous mutated magical beast has appeared on Orum's northern road, attacking and devouring several caravans. He notes that 4 of their elite city knights went to subdue it and never returned. It seems a noble must step in personally, but House Valtus can only deploy 2. He asks Tehran to join them to make it a 3-man squad. Tehran immediately agrees, saying that protecting people is a mage's duty anyway, but as Tehran walks away, he thinks to himself that something feels off. Mages usually avoid risking their necks for trade routes. He remembers Lug explaining that the northern road is Orum's key trade route, and it's been closed for 10 days already. They need it reopened quickly. Tehran smiles slightly, realizing that 10 days ago was before he even arrived in Orum. So that's why Lug let him use the library so easily. He wanted a disposable mercenary. We cut to the city gate. Heavy iron boots march along the cobblestones. Tehran is walking with Azella, Marvin, and a squad of heavily armored city knights. Azella is stretching her arms, complaining that her father is really something else. She scowls, saying she can't believe her dad roped a guest into hunting a dangerous beast, asking if he really thinks so little of their skills. She quickly looks at Tehran, waving her hands, saying she's not criticizing him, she's just saying her father tends to overreact. Marvin smiles politely, telling his sister that calling the head of the house overdramatic is a bit much. She tells him to stay out of it. Marvin's sweat drops, shaking his tense fist in frustration. Classic sibling dynamic. Marvin turns to Tehran, placing a hand over his chest, introducing himself as Marvin Valtus and saying it's a pleasure to finally meet him. Tehran nods, saying likewise. They step off the paved road, their boots crushing the twigs as they enter the dense northern forest. Azella huffs, walking ahead, saying they should finish this quickly so they can head back and rest. Marvin leans closer to Tehran, giving him a sneaky smile, asking if he happens to have any romantic interest in his sister. Tehran deadpans, no. Marvin's smile turns incredibly wide, letting out a relieved sigh, saying that's good to hear. Suddenly, a knight up front screams, "Halt!" The entire group stops. In the middle of the path is the destroyed, shattered wreckage of a merchant carriage. The lead knight inspects the broken wooden wheel, noting that the beast likely attacked a peddler coming down from the north. Tehran steps closer, his sharp eyes scanning the wood. He points to a massive, dusty handprint stamped on the broken carriage planks. He looks at the shape of the fingers and says, "It's a monkey." Azella looks at him, totally confused, her face turning into a funny cartoon expression. A monkey? Tehran explains that the beast attacked the peddlers and fled back into the forest, and they should be able to track it by following the crushed foliage. Marvin admits that neither he nor his sister possess high-level tracking magic, asking if one of the knights should lead. Tehran kneels, touching the dirt, saying he'll try locating it himself. Azella's eyes go sharp, her grin turning sly. She asks if he is from a specific lineage of tracking mages. Tehran lies, claiming he's just used it often enough to be familiar. He focuses his tense Sahar tracking traits, whispering the conceptual command, search. His gray eye flares with a bright, glowing blue magic aura. Whoosh. A physical trail of glowing blue mana guides appear on the dirt, winding through the dense trees. Tehran points his finger, telling the group, this way. They follow the trail for a few minutes, eventually reaching a quiet, clear forest stream. Tehran stops, saying the trail ends here. He looks at the water, noting that the beast washed itself. Azella is shocked, asking if a simple beast is smart enough to avoid being tracked. Tehran stays quiet, realizing this is no normal monster, it has high-tier human intelligence. Suddenly, his Zahar tracking senses redline. He smells the dark mana aura right above them. He whips his head around, screaming, "Be Hind Yo You!" Whoosh! A massive, towering, golden-armed gorilla monster with glowing red eyes drops from the canopy, letting out a deafening roar. The beast slams its giant fist into the ground, throwing up massive rock pillars. The lead knight screams, telling everyone to move, but it's too late. The massive shockwave of the beast's entry slam sends all 4 frontline knights flying through the air, blood spraying as their armor shatters. Tehran immediately flips backward through the air, dodging the debris. He lands gracefully on a rock, his face completely calm as he locks his eyes onto the giant ape. One of the knights is lying on the ground, his face covered in blood, struggling to stand. The giant beast stands over them, its massive golden arms casting a terrifying shadow. Azella whips her head around, her pink hair flying as she prepares to launch her counterspell. Tehran looks at the bleeding knights, thinking that his mother's warnings about the brutal reality of magic warfare were completely correct. Azella's face contorts in fury as she screams, "Attack!" The remaining knights draw their steel swords, charging at the giant golden ape. The beast lets out a high-pitched scream, realizing it is outnumbered, and turns around to sprint back into the forest. Turan immediately reaches for his leather sling, tensing his wrist. The knights scream in frustration as the ape quickly outruns them. Azella grunts, "It's too fast, we lost it." But mid-run, Azella's eyes widen as a sudden, tense blue streak of light splits the air right past her cheek. A supersonic kinetic railgun pebble, reinforced with maximum conceptual causality, tears a path through the forest. The giant ape looks back, its tensed red eyes widening in pure terror. Bam! The kinetic stone slams directly into its back, the impact completely blowing its shoulder armor to pieces and sending it crashing into the dirt. Azella and Marvin are completely frozen in absolute shock, staring at the destruction. Turan casually walks past them through the smoke, winding up his sling for the next shot. Our guy looks at the struggling beast, his face calm and cold as ice. The hunt is officially underway. Azella's eyes widen in disbelief as she feels the sheer wind pressure of Turan's attack. The tense blue kinetic guide path is still glowing in the air, splitting the forest path in half. The ape lets out a terrifying scream, struggle to sit up, its shoulder oozing black fluid. Bam! The stone hits dead center, completely shattering its bones. Azella and Marvin can't even process what they are looking at. A simple kid with a leather sling just sniped a high-speed monster. Turan casually steps through the dust, his white cloak blowing in the wind. He looks at Azella, telling her to finish it off while the beast is tensed. The giant ape struggles to its feet, letting out one final tensed roar of rage. Azella's face contorts in pure, unhinged excitement. She raises her tensed hands, screaming, "Die, whoosh!" A massive roaring torrent of fire mana erupts from her palms. The flames mold into a colossal, multi-jawed fire serpent that lunges down to swallow the ape. A massive, white-hot explosion of pure fire completely incinerates the giant beast, reducing it to ash in a single frame. Turan looks at the destruction, thinking to himself that this is indeed the signature bloodline magic of House Valtus's pyromaniacs. The remaining knights let out a long, exhausted sigh, collapsing in the grass, saying it's finally over. Azella walks over to Turan laughing, saying she actually got chills for a second when his stone shot past her head. She turns to Marvin, teasing him, saying he was the one who screamed like a little girl. Marvin panic defends himself. Behind them, the injured knights are groaning in pain, trying to bandage their broken arms and bleeding heads. Turan looks at the mess, his expression going completely cold. He thinks back to the battle, realizing that while this was a surprise attack, the nobles easily could have avoided serious injuries to their men. He stares at Azella and Marvin with a sharp, cynical glare. He realizes that because nobles' physical bodies are naturally strengthened by their massive mana pools, they are several times tougher than commoner knights. Yet they didn't hesitate for a single second to use the weaker knights as human shields to protect themselves. Marvin notices his glare, asking what's wrong. Turan instantly switches back to his polite, low-key smile, saying it's nothing. Azella happily waves him over, telling him to hurry up and come absorb the monster's leftover mana. Turan walks up to the massive, black-burned corpse of the ape. He extends his hand, and a massive, dense vortex of glowing green mana starts flowing into his body. He closes his eyes, thinking that just like the ancient books in the library said, even if multiple people absorb a beast's mana, the overall enhancement rate doesn't decrease. Marvin lets out a sigh, dropping his hand, saying he's already hit his limit and can't absorb any more. Azella agrees, complaining about her crappy growth cap. Azella looks at Turan, realizing why her father sent him along. She watches the massive torrent of green energy still rushing into Turan's hand, realizing his mana pool capacity and spell proficiency completely rival her own. She thinks to herself that he is a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. The group marches back toward the white stone gates of Great City Orem as the evening sun sets over the spires. Marvin smiles warmly, telling Turan that if it weren't for his tracking and his initial tensed snipe, they would have never defeated the beast. Turan waves his hand, politely saying it was nothing spectacular. He says his only regret is that he noticed the beast too late and let it get the first strike, because he didn't expect it to have high-tier search magic. Azella stops, surprised, asking if it had search magic. Turan explains that different abilities awaken based on the monster's physical traits. He notes that the ape had abnormally large hands and giant dilated eyes, meaning it was built for range, throwing, and long-distance tracking. Marvin's jaw drops. He asks how Turan figured all of that out. Turan smiles, saying he read it in a monster encyclopedia at the library earlier. Marvin laughs, calling the library a stuffy, boring place where nobody ever goes. He says he went in once a long time ago out of curiosity, but left without reading half a volume because the books were too difficult. Turan smiles and tells him that next time he should ask the librarian to find him some easier books. Azella tilts her head, her face turning cartoonish, asking, The librarian? Tehran stops, looking at her. And then, he looks back at the towering white library spires in the distance. Back at the library, Tehran opens the gold-plated doors, and the little floaty black-haired girl immediately teleports in front of him, chirping, "Welcome back, Tehran." Tehran stands there, sweat dropping. He thinks to himself that he was incredibly careless. No commoner knight would ever call a noble by their first name, they only use esteemed one. And besides, the way this little ghost girl looks and behaves doesn't exactly scream official librarian. He smiles slightly, looking at her, and asks, "How do you know my name?" The girl goes completely tensed, her mouth hanging wide open in panic. She floats onto a table, crossing her legs, and laughs nervously, asking if he only noticed now. Tehran nods, saying he figured she learned it from his entry permit. She floats back up, twirling a blue glowing book in her hands, bragging that as long as it's inside this library, her gaze reaches absolutely everywhere. Tehran asks how he should address her. She shrugs, saying she doesn't actually have a name, so he can call her whatever he wants. She floats right up to his face, teasingly suggesting, "My love." Tehran deadpans, saying he will just stick to librarian. She calls him stiff. She floats around him, saying it's awkward when he suddenly gets so polite after calling her to find books for days. Tehran smiles, saying he never did that. He holds up his hand, telling her to stop floating so close because she is being a bit burdensome. Tehran asks if she is an ancient wizard from the old empire. She laughs, saying no, she wasn't even a human to begin with. She says she is a living spirit. She explains that when a soul inhabits a living thing, it becomes a spirit, but when it inhabits something that is neither alive nor dead, it becomes a library spirit. In other words, she is the library. She floats upside down, saying her human form is just for comfortable communication and depends entirely on the user's mental preferences. Tehran's sweat drops, telling her to not make stuff up, but she giggles, saying she is basically like a reflection of his soul in water. Tehran goes quiet, thinking. He slowly reaches out his hand, pressing his tensed palm directly against her stomach. He pushes, and his hand passes straight through her body like a chilly mist. She blushes, asking where he is touching because it feels incredibly weird. Tehran apologizes, withdrawing his hand. She grumbles, saying she has absolutely no physical mass and can't directly exert power on intruders. She sighs, saying that if she could, she would have brutally punished every single noble bastard who ever stole books from her shelves over the centuries. Tehran realizes that House Valtus has absolutely no idea she exists. She floats gracefully in a circle, saying that's because until now there was nobody in Orem with the high-tier qualifications required to perceive her presence. She floats right up to his shoulder, saying her creator built her so only mages with highly complex bloodlines can see her. She giggles, saying only Tehran can see her, which is pretty romantic. Tehran looks at her, asking what she means by complex. She explains it's what modern wizards call bloodline combinations. Tehran looks down, asking if she can tell him about his own bloodline. She tells him he should ask his parents. Tehran says he is an orphan. The spirit goes quiet, her expression softening, and says she can check it for him if he consents to let her examine his body. Tehran's sweat drops, asking, "Examine my body?" The spirit grins like a cartoon gremlin, giggling, as Tehran nervously asks if this is really how it's done. Whoosh. She thrusts her entire arm directly through Tehran's tense chest. Tehran's face completely twists in shock, letting out a scream. She smiles, saying they are officially connected. Tehran tells her to stop saying weird things, noting it doesn't actually hurt. She closes her eyes, scanning his core. She says there are a few tiny bits, but the main bloodline in his body belongs to the legendary Pursuer and Hunter clan. Tehran nods, asking if that's House Zahar. She says yes. But then, her eyes snap wide open. She gasps, "Wait, there's one more." She pulls her arm out, yelling that his bloodline is mixed. Tehran, panting, asks what's mixed. She explains he is the result of two completely different noble bloodlines, but says the second one is currently locked and she can't read it. She tells him that locked bloodlines are common in mixed combinations, and as he grows stronger, it will naturally open up. Tehran nods, saying he understands. He looks down at his hands, whispering, "Mother." He realizes his mother was far too polite and highly educated to be a simple commoner. She was likely a descendant of a powerful noble family whose bloodline was so diluted it couldn't even hold basic knight-level mana. He bows politely to the spirit, thanking her. She giggles, telling him that if he's grateful, he should stay in the library for another month. From that day on, Tehran doesn't read alone. He sits with the spirit, constantly asking her to explain the scientific principles in the ancient books. He manipulates a water droplet, flattening it in the air like a magnifying glass to inspect microscopic particles. Having the complex laws of nature explained to him in plain simple words is a treasure beyond measure for his conceptual magic. He learns how microorganisms cause diseases and how cellular decay works. He grasps the exact physical laws of light refraction, friction heat, and the precise biological process of how wounds heal. Turan sits at a table, placing a fresh red apple in front of him. He decides to experiment with decay. He extends his finger, gently tapping the stem of the apple. Oosh! Instantly, the apple turns black, shriveling into a rotten, decaying mass of mold in a single frame. The spirit is completely amazed. Turan notes that while existing magic can do this, understanding the exact biological laws of decay allows him to cast it using practically zero mana. Simply changing the way he perceives the physical laws of the world has raised his wizard tier to a completely monstrous level. He realizes that powerful noble houses are likely monopolizing this physical knowledge on purpose, because if every commoner knew it, the nobles would lose their competitive edge. The spirit sighs, saying that explains why the general level of magic knowledge across the continent keeps dropping over the centuries. The scene transitions to the outside of the White Tower. Turan looks at the spires, telling the spirit it's officially time for him to leave. He notes the Lord of Orem has been dropping subtle hints for him to go. The spirit immediately bursts into tears, diving through the air, screaming, "No! Take me with YOU!" Splat. She faceplants hard into the stone floor, completely forgetting she is a bound spirit. She looks up, her face tensed, asking if he can't just stay here forever. Turan smiles, telling her he'll pass. She huffs, calling him stubborn. She floats back to the shelves, telling him this continent is full of the ancient god's legacy, and tells him to go look around once in a while. She says he might find a spirit who knows even more than her. Turan walks to the door, placing his hand on the handle, saying he'll come visit her from time to time. The spirit turns her back, pretending to be annoyed, telling him to come if he wants, or don't. Classic tsundere behavior. Turan looks back, a soft, tense smile on his face, promising he'll return because there are still so many books he hasn't read. He walks out of the grand gates of Great City Orem, his heavy travel pack on his back. He pulls out the detailed continental map he copied from the library. He looks at the Eastern Territory, the Emerald Desert, the main ancestral stronghold of House Zahar. Our guy Turan is finally back on the road, looking like a traveler who actually enjoys carrying a backpack twice his size. His destination is the Emerald Desert, the absolute wasteland that serves as the home base for the Zahar family. He wants answers about his parents, but honestly, he is in absolutely no rush to get there. He figures that if the clues manage to survive 18 years of absolute silence, they can wait a few more weeks. So he takes his sweet time, setting up a nice campfire by the river to cook up a decent meal. It is a peaceful stroll through a forest filled with literal animal skeletons, which is always a great sign, until his high-spec Zahar ears pick up a weird sound cutting through the quiet woods. A horse is losing its absolute mind somewhere in the bushes just ahead of him. He peeks through the leaves to see what kind of mess he has stumbled into this time. A majestic red horse is standing guard over a blonde guy who has clearly lost a fight with the dirt. Turan notices the high-tier saddle and realizes the horse is actively defending its fallen owner, and the attackers are standing right there, complaining about how a mere beast could be this incredibly annoying. Turan narrows his eyes as his sensory tracking traits lock onto the targets. Dark elves. Two of them, looking like they just crawled out of a heavy metal music video, they start channeling dark mana, their hands glowing with a nasty purple energy that looks highly toxic. Turan recognizes the spell. It is high-tier necromancy, summoning rotting beast puppets right out of the swamp. He debates whether he should even bother helping, since for all he knows, the blonde guy might have started it, but then he sees something that completely ruins his lunch plans. One of the dark elves is casually chewing on a raw human arm like it is a cheap chicken wing. The other one literally asks him to share, telling him to just eat his own harvested parts instead. Yep. No moral gray area here. These guys are cannibalistic freaks, and they are officially getting speedrun. He drops his gear, activates his Zahar concealment magic, and vanishes into the forest shadows. Before the chewing elf can even swallow his bite, a high-speed wind blade shears his head clean off. The survivor turns around in absolute shock as his partner's blood sprays across the grass. He instantly realizes they are dealing with a master of stealth magic who can erase their presence. His eyes glow with fury, his teeth bared as he realizes his partner got one shot. He screams at his beast puppets to gather around him for physical protection, but Turan's kinetic railgun sling is already fully loaded and spinning at supersonic speeds. The pebble flies, completely vaporizing the skull of a giant undead ram in a single frame. The remaining dark elf loses his mind, screaming for the invisible bastard to show themselves. He orders his giant bull puppet to charge blindly into the trees, shattering the trunks. But searching for a Zahar in a forest is like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. The elf summons a shadow hound, hoping the beast's dark nose can sniff out his location. He sweeps the clearing with waves of corrupt mana to force any stealth user out of hiding. Turan just smirks from the shadows, because he has already repositioned himself directly behind them. The stealth drops, and the elf screams in triumph as he finally spots his target. He commands his remaining dark wolf and the giant bull to instantly crush him. Turan calmly prepares his hand, utilizing the exact elemental causality he studied back in Aurum. He constructs a perfectly tense sphere of roaring flames in his palm, and unleashes a massive torrent of fire that completely incinerates the path. But the mutated bull puppet is apparently built different, charging straight through the firestorm. Turan leaps backward to dodge, but the explosive heat ruins his balance. He lands hard, realizing his plan to quickly clean this up is falling apart. His high sensory traits flare up a split second too late to warn him of a flank attack. The shadow hound lunges from the smoke, biting down hard on his forearm. Turan delivers a brutal physical kick, launching the beast back into the dirt, but he does not have time to recover before a shadow falls over him. The giant bull puppet is already in his face, its glowing red eyes filled with malice. The impact is absolute, throwing Turan backward through the air. He hits the ground hard, coughing up a violent spray of fresh blood. He curls up on the grass, groaning in pain as the elf and his beasts close in. The dark elf laughs hysterically, mocking the brat who thought he could easily hunt his kin, and then the red horse Tilly executes a flawless horse kick directly into the back of his head. The remaining beasts freeze, completely confused as to why the horse is suddenly playing martial arts. Tilly goes full war unit mode, stomping on the shadow hound and headbutting the bull to protect her savior. The dark elf drags himself up, his face swollen and bloody, screaming in absolute humiliation. He vows to tear the horse apart, but a sharp whistling sound cuts through his screaming. A blue supersonic kinetic beam tears a massive hole straight through his chest. He drops dead instantly. Turns out, playing weak on the floor is a great way to get a villain to stop moving. Tilly trots over, her hooves clicking softly on the dirt as she inspects the battlefield. Turan lies there, breathing heavily, his ribs feeling like they just went through a trash compactor. He slowly pushes himself up onto his knees, spitting out the remaining blood. He mutters that he actually almost died there, proving that overconfidence is a very fast way to get cooked. Tilly gently nudges the top of his head with her nose, making sure he is still alive. Turan looks up at the massive horse standing over him like a concerned guardian. He smiles, patting her nose and thanking her for the assist. Tilly is officially the real MVP of this fight. Behind them, the blonde noble's eye slowly begins to flutter open as the dark mana dissipates. By nightfall, the forest has settled into a peaceful, moonlit quiet. The blonde guy sits up with a sudden scream, his adrenaline still running from the daytime ambush. He looks up to see Turan casually sitting across from him, eating roasted meat over a campfire. Turan looks at him mid-chew, giving him a flat, silent stare. The guy asks who he is, and Turan deadpans that he is the guy who saved him from being turned into an elf snack. Tilly walks into the firelight, nudging her owner's shoulder to calm him down. The guy cries out her name, hugging his horse like a giant golden retriever who just found his favorite toy. Turan comments that she is incredibly smart, even knowing to drag him to a safer location during the fight. The guy introduces himself as Aziz of the Burke family, thanking him deeply for the grace of saving his life. Turan asks if there was a specific reason those dark elf necromancers targeted him. Aziz says there was none. He was just traveling with his servants when they were suddenly attacked. His eyes fill with tears, saying he heard other races were violent, but he never imagined this level of horror. Tilly stands quietly in the background as her master starts to sniffle over the fire. Aziz covers his face, apologizing for looking so pathetic in front of his savior. He explains that the knights and servants who died today practically raised him since he was a child. Turan watches him closely, realizing this noble is actually a genuinely good person. That is a rare find in this world. Aziz asks how many dark elves there were, and Turan tells him he killed 2, which was likely the whole squad. Turan closes his eyes, casting a low-frequency sweep of the surrounding forest. His sensory mana ripples through the dark trees like a silent sonar. He confirms that there are absolutely no more dark elves lurking in the area. Aziz sits up, asking if Turan has any urgent business since he is traveling all alone. He asks if he is perhaps the son of some great noble family, wondering why someone so powerful has no guards. Turan lies, saying he is not actually that strong and only won because he used a sneaky ambush and Tilly helped. To make his lie believable, he releases a small, modest flare of his blue mana. Aziz flares his own golden-orange mana in response, his eyes widening in surprise. The campsite lights up as their dual elemental energies clash in a bright display. Turan is stunned. Aziz's mana density is actually incredibly high. He realizes Aziz is a high-tier talent. The only reason he got caught was likely because necromancy is a massive cheat code. Aziz stares at Turan, still wondering why a talented rogue wizard is wandering the wilds like a beggar. He formally invites Turan to visit the Burke family estate so they can properly repay the debt. He proudly states that the Burke family is a legendary lineage of enchantment artisans who serve the great House of Arabian. He promises that if Turan escorts him back, they will craft a custom magic artifact perfectly suited for him. The next morning, they stand before a simple headstone in the quiet forest. Aziz stares at the grave, wishing he could have sent his fallen servants back to their homeland for a proper burial. He turns to Turan, thanking him deeply for not laughing at him for showing so much emotion. He explains that his father always taught him that mourning dead subordinates is a pathetic display of weakness. According to noble law, those who die in battle reside with the gods, so a true leader must simply move forward. But Aziz looks at the dirt grave and says that if strength means not grieving his family, he never wants to be strong. Turan smiles warmly, telling him that is not weakness at all. It is just genuine human kindness. Aziz suggests they start talking more casually, noting they do not seem that far apart in age anyway. He flashes a bright, friendly smile and extends a hand of friendship. Turan looks at the hand, a bit taken aback by how quickly this noble has let his guard down, but he takes it, officially locking in a valuable noble ally. Aziz suggests they take a quick lunch break, walking over to a heavy wooden chest. Turan walks over, curious about what kind of high-tier luggage this guy is hauling around. Aziz opens it to reveal a massive stash of fresh bread, meat, and cold wine. It is a portable magic refrigerator. The food inside stays perfectly cold and fresh for an entire week. Aziz starts showing off his other tools, an endless water kettle, a camping barrier plate, and an automatic proximity alarm. He even shows off his tunic, which has a built-in self-cleaning function so he never has to do laundry. Turan is completely speechless. Magic items are supposed to be legendary relics, yet this guy is carrying a whole catalog. Aziz laughs, saying these basic items are not worth a fraction of his life, promising a far greater reward at his mansion. He swears that even if his family elders try to object, he will personally make sure Turan gets a top-tier artifact. But then Aziz's expression shifts, a sharp, curious look entering his blue eyes. He notes that during their brief journey, he has seen Turan use freezing, levitation, decay, and instant death magic. He asks if Turan spent his entire life studying every school of magic, or if he has a broken bloodline that copies spells. Turan's sweat drops, realizing his absurd versatility is starting to look highly suspicious. Aziz quickly holds up his hands, laughing and saying he was just joking since they agreed not to pry. Instead, he asks how old Turan is, noting his face looks like he has not even hit 30 yet. Turan tells him he is actually turning 19 in about a month, which completely blows Aziz's mind. Aziz turns pale, revealing that he is actually 43 years old this year. He crosses his arms, sighing over the fact that a 19-year-old is already outclassing him, comparing him to his cousin. He mentions his second cousin, who is also a legendary magical prodigy around Turan's age. Turan asks if he could simply ask that talented cousin to craft his magic item instead. Aziz shakes his head, explaining she is not from their branch line, but the main family. She is the direct princess of Arabian, destined to lead their entire great lineage in the future. They continue their trek, the sound of horse hooves echoing on the dirt path. Aziz explains that in a great lineage, succession is a brutal, cutthroat competition. Unlike minor families, leaders cannot easily pass the crown to their children because of the massive generational talent pool. But among all the patriarch's children, Mesa emerged with the greatest talent in their history. Within 10 years of awakening, she mastered their bloodline magic and every single combat magic style. At age 21, her power rivals their core elders. Turan asks if her family gave her special mana support to secure her future. Aziz confirms it, saying she even inherited their great-uncle's massive mana pools when he passed away. Turan realizes why these great lineages stay at the top. The rich just keep inheriting more cheat codes. Suddenly, Aziz points ahead, announcing that they have finally arrived at their destination. Turan looks up, feeling a massive change in the ambient mana of the area. The golden grass of the plains rustles gently in the warm breeze. They have reached the Grand Plains of Decane. This is the absolute heart of the central territory of House Arabian, and standing before them is Zabalin, the massive white stone fortress castle of the Burke family. The massive double doors swing open, and a middle-aged noblewoman runs out with her arms wide. Aziz sprints forward and hugs his mother, sobbing loudly like a toddler returning from his first day of school. Turan stands in the background with a completely deadpan face, his mind screaming the words 43 over and over. His father walks up, telling Aziz to show some dignity and address his mother as Madam in public. Aziz immediately introduces Turan, calling him his ultimate benefactor who risked his life to save him. His mother turns pale, asking what kind of horror could have made his journey this dangerous. When Aziz mentions dark elf necromancers, she goes full warlord, screaming that she will personally lead an army to slaughter them. The father tells her to calm down, reminding her that they have highly important guests watching. The father then looks at Turan, asking which noble family their guest belongs to. Turan sighs, saying that is a bit hard to answer. He confesses he was born to a commoner mother and has absolutely no idea who his father is. Aziz is shocked Turan never told him, but Turan deadpans that being a bastard is not exactly high society dinner conversation. The mother's warm expression instantly freezes. She coldly states that they will reward him handsomely for his service. However, she tells him it will be impossible to offer him a room inside the mansion itself. Aziz starts to argue, but she explains that because of a highly important guest, they cannot allow unknown identities inside. But a cold, calm voice cuts through the argument. If it is because of me, you do not need to do that, Aunt. A dark figure slowly steps out from the shadows of the grand hallway. It is Princess Mesa Arabian, looking incredibly pale, dark, and broody. Aziz gasps her name, completely shocked to see his cousin here. Turan narrows his eyes, analyzing her presence. This is the prodigy who looks like a literal god. Mesa explains she is hiding here because of a recent assassination attempt by Zahar Vermin. Turan sweat drops. He is literally a Zahar. This is about to become a very awkward roommate situation. Aziz is horrified that assassins bypassed Arabian's legendary defenses. Mesa coldly replies that there is almost certainly a traitor inside their main house. She says she is tired and retires for the night, leaving the family standing in a tense, silent huddle. With Mesa's permission, the mother immediately changes her tune, ordering the maids to prepare the second-best guest room for Turan. The next morning, Turan wakes up in a massive, ultra-luxurious canopy bed. He walks out into the corridor and stops to examine a beautifully crafted magic lantern on the wall. He paces down the quiet, sunlit hallway, admiring the intricate metalwork. Suddenly, Aziz calls out his name from down the hall. Aziz waves warmly, asking what he is doing wandering around alone this early. Turan points to the lantern, and Aziz laughs, saying it is just a basic magic lamp children make for training. He offers to give him a bunch from their storage, but Turan politely declines. Suddenly, a massive, deafening strike of yellow lightning shakes the castle windows. Turan looks out, his eyes widening at the raw, destructive power crackling in the courtyard. Aziz sighs, explaining that Mesa is already hard at work training. She never stops. Turan asks if that is the legendary storm lineage magic of House Arabian. Aziz confirms it, admitting that even though he loves his own bloodline, Mesa's lightning makes her look like a literal deity. Turan gets a sharp, intense look in his eyes. He is suddenly very curious to see just how strong this prodigy really is. Aziz notices his interest and suggests they go take a look, though Turan hesitates to intrude on her space. Aziz laughs it off, saying he will vouch for him since he is clearly not an assassin. He smirks, admitting his real reason is that he is deeply curious to see who is actually stronger between Turan and Mesa. He confesses that Mesa made him run off crying during childhood training, and he desperately wants to see her get frustrated just once. They walk out to the grand stone courtyard where Mesa is standing alone in her dark robes. She slowly turns around as she senses their approach. Aziz greets her, and Turan politely introduces himself. Mesa acknowledges him and asks what brings them to her training grounds so suddenly. Aziz laughs, lying that they just wanted to join in on the training like the old days. Mesa deadpans, reminding him that back then, he struggled for a week on a spell she mastered in 2 tries before running off crying. Turan snickers, prompting Aziz to give him a highly offended look. Aziz quickly changes the subject, hyping Turan up as a complete magic prodigy and an absolute monster. And then, he drops the ultimate spark. How about you two have a quick fight? Mesa tilts her head up, her gaze instantly shifting to Turan. Turan looks back at her, realizing Aziz has just locked him into a corner he cannot escape. Mesa's eye flares with high-voltage blue storm electricity. Mesa immediately tries to back out of the fight, claiming it is practically bullying to make our guy duel her. Aziz agrees that Turan lacks raw firepower, but he hypes up his crazy adaptability instead. He tells her that Turan's magic learning speed makes everyone else look like they are playing in the tutorial area. Mesa gets curious and decides to see what this supposed genius can actually do. Turan suggests a clean compromise. They each cast a spell, and the other has to copy it. Aziz loves the idea because he is just happy to watch some free entertainment. Mesa agrees, but bans innate bloodline magic because she thinks that would be cheating. She decides to go first, tapping her foot against the stone floor. Aziz and Turan watch closely as she prepares her move. A tiny, glowing green sprout breaks through the solid stone. Within seconds, massive glowing vines burst from the paving stones like angry snakes. Aziz is the first casualty, getting wrapped up before he can even register the threat. Mesa explains it is high-tier plant manipulation and asks Tehran if he can copy it. Aziz is dangling upside down, begging to be let go because he is getting dizzy. Tehran looks at the glowing vines, analyzing the underlying mechanics. He drops to one knee and touches the cracked stone floor. He recalls his library lessons: fire is just combustion, water is just pulling moisture from the air. So plant magic is not actually creating wood out of nothing. It is simply finding dormant seeds in the dirt and forcing them to grow at supersonic speeds. He channels his mana and commands the ground to sprout. Mesa's jaw drops as glowing blue vines instantly shoot up around Tehran. Aziz is still hanging upside down, completely stunned by how fast our guy cracked the code. Mesa asks him where he has seen this spell before, but Tehran admits it is his first time trying it. She drops Aziz on his head, realizing his annoying hype was actually completely accurate. She tells Tehran it is his turn to propose a spell to copy. Tehran realizes using his signature Zahar stealth magic here is basically a death sentence, so he looks around for a safe, non-noble spell that won't give away his identity. He spots a patch of wild yellow flowers in the garden bushes. Something rustles in the tall grass. He coaxes a common sewer rat to walk right out onto the stone path. Mesa looks disgusted, asking if his grand spell is just basic animal control. Tehran smiles, explaining that the rat is actually just a target. His eyes flash with blue mana as he locks onto the rodent. He grabs the rat, channeling his scientific decay spell directly into its body. The rat instantly shrivels up, turning into a mummified husk in his hand. Mesa's eyes widen in absolute horror. Tehran tosses the dried-up rodent aside, telling her he is done. Mesa steps up, her competitive pride refusing to let her lose to a commoner. She gestures toward the grass, beckoning another target. Another sewer rat trots out of the bushes on cue. She snatches it up mid-air, preparing to mimic the decay magic. She tries to manifest the same rotting phenomenon, but nothing happens. The rat just squeaks in her hand. She starts sweating, realizing this is not a standard elemental spell she can easily copy. Aziz complains that this magic is absolutely disgusting and wonders why Tehran even knows it. Tehran smirks, realizing that even the great Arabian family has zero knowledge of basic microbiology. Aziz suggests they just call it a win for Tehran and go grab some lunch. Mesa snaps at him to shut up, her mana flaring as she refuses to give up, but she does not understand the scientific causality of cellular decay. Wizards need to understand the physical cause of a spell to cast it efficiently. If they don't, the spell consumes an absolute mountain of mana just to force the result, so she decides to compensate for her lack of knowledge by dumping her entire mana reserve into the rat. She screams at the rodent to rot while still alive. The rat squeaks in pain as the massive wave of raw mana hits it. The sheer volume of energy forces the cells to decay, mummifying the rat in her grip. Aziz is amazed that she actually pulled it off. Mesa gasps for air, holding up her dried-up prize with trembling hands. Her vision starts to blur as the extreme mana drain takes its toll. She collapses onto the stone floor, completely knocked out. Aziz panics, running over to lift her head and screaming for her to wake up. Tehran looks at her, analyzing her condition. He knows mages do not usually faint just from running out of mana, they just feel extremely tired. But then he notices something off about her physical body. Her hands are incredibly thin, her skin pale like a ghost. He picks her up, telling Aziz to immediately bring water, salt, and the adults to her room. He realizes she is as light as a lamb. Her body's so weak she shouldn't even be standing, let alone fighting. They rush her inside the White Castle of Zabalin. Mesa slowly opens her eyes as she recovers. Aziz's mother is hovering over her bed, looking extremely worried. Mesa asks why she is in bed, and her aunt explains she fainted during the duel. Mesa looks away, her pride completely shattered. The aunt looks suspicious, asking if the commoner guest did something to her. Misa snaps, telling them it was just her own mistake and begging everyone to leave her alone. The aunt sighs, pointing to a bowl of soup she prepared to help her recover. She urges her to eat, knowing Mesa usually neglects her health for magic training. Mesa quietly thanks her as her aunt and maids leave the room. Once the door closes, her expression darkens. She stares at the bowl of warm soup on her bedside table. She picks up the spoon, her hand shaking. She takes a small bite of the broth, and her eyes instantly freeze as her trauma triggers. She flashes back to a rain-soaked night, voices begging her to save them because she is their only hope. She drops the bowl, vomiting onto the floor as the horrific memories overwhelm her. She clutches her sheets, her knuckles turning white. She curls into a ball, holding her head as she trembles in the dark room. Meanwhile, Tehran is escorted down into the depths of the castle. They arrive at the Burke family basement, which is apparently a giant temple to the limping goddess. A guard draws his sword, showing off the thick, solid stone doors. A massive, scarred warrior named Haram Berg tells Turan to abandon any thoughts of escaping. Turan's sweat drops, sighing that he wasn't even thinking of trying to break out of a noble basement. Haram taps the stone wall, bragging about how incredibly solid their architecture is. He keeps repeating it, staring intensely at our guy. Turan is genuinely confused, wondering if this giant guard is just trying to flex his masonry skills. Suddenly, Haram moves. He swings his massive greatsword through the air. He executes a series of incredibly fast, precise strikes. Turan watches him, asking why he is suddenly performing a solo sword show. Haram ignores him, continuing his high-speed training routine. The sword splits the air with perfect efficiency. Every motion flows into the next without a single wasted frame. Turan is deeply impressed, realizing this is the peak efficiency of a masterfully trained human body. Haram finishes his set, turning back to his prisoner. Turan apologizes for interrupting, but Haram just stares at him. He grabs Turan's collar, demanding to know what he saw in his movements just now. Turan's sweat drops, quickly saying he thought the swordplay was absolutely incredible. Haram relaxes his grip, satisfied with the answer. He explains that most arrogant nobles think martial arts are beneath them because magic is easier. Turan points out that focusing on magic is simply more efficient for non-combat bloodlines. But he also remembers his own close calls where raw, physical stats saved his life. Haram flips his sword in his hand, holding it out. He commands Turan to take the weapon. Turan asks if it is really wise to hand a sword to a suspicious prisoner they just locked up. Haram laughs, telling him a sword is just a piece of iron. It only becomes dangerous in a strong hand. Turan takes the hilt, wondering what he is even supposed to do with it. Haram's eyes go wide. Turan's body suddenly flares with an overwhelming aura of blue mana. Haram stands his ground, reminding Turan that a weak body cannot hope to cut him, no matter how much iron he holds. Turan agrees, dropping his posture slightly. Haram watches him closely, his scar-faced smirk fading. Turan flares his blue energy again, adjusting his grip on the hilt. Haram suddenly snaps, shouting that he is doing it completely wrong. He tells him to stop relying on mana and focus entirely on his physical form. He physically adjusts Turan's stance, telling him to sink his weight and lower his elbows. He warns him that weak posture will get him killed on a real battlefield. He orders him to perform 10 perfect swings, focusing entirely on his breathing. Haram looks at him, noting that Turan actually has a fine physical vessel hidden under his lazy exterior. He tells him wizards are fools for thinking magic guarantees survival. Turan nods, sweating as he pushes through the heavy physical repetitions. Suddenly, the massive basement doors creak open behind them. Aziz's mother stands at the threshold of the temple. She bows slightly, apologizing deeply for locking up their honored benefactor. Turan immediately hands the sword back, apologizing for making a scene as a guest. The mother explains that Mesa woke up and wanted to offer him a formal apology. Turan is escorted to Mesa's room, where she is staring out the window looking like a gothic painting. She thanks him for his concern, and Turan says he is just glad she is safe. She immediately drops the pleasantries, demanding to know the secret behind his rat-rotting magic. Turan smiles, offering to trade the secret if she teaches him one of Arabian's secret arts in return. Mesa agrees, and Turan casually mentions he does not really care about winning or losing the duel. She snaps, saying her pride as an Arabian cannot handle a draw with a mysterious wanderer. So she accepts the deal, eager to learn his secret trick. They stand in her luxurious room, sealing the bargain. Turan explains that his decay spell is just bio-enhancement targeted at invisible microorganisms. Mesa is annoyed, realizing she wasted a mountain of mana simply because she didn't know basic biology. She complains that brute-forcing a spell with sheer volume should not count as a loss. She grabs his collar, ordering him to tell Aziz that the duel was a tie so her cousin doesn't get cocky. Turan agrees, and Mesa goes over to her drawer to find his compensation. She pulls out a simple wooden comb. She runs the comb through her dark hair, producing a soft crackling sound. She explains that friction creates attraction, revealing the base secret of her lightning magic. Turan deadpans the words, static electricity. Mesa freezes in absolute shock, asking him how on earth he already knows that. She realizes her supposedly profound secret art is just basic common knowledge to him. Blushing with embarrassment, she suggests they train together every evening so she can find something he doesn't know. Turan smiles and accepts, setting their meeting time in the garden. Later that evening, the Burke family hosts a massive high-end feast. The table is piled high with roasted meats, cakes, and wine. Aziz complains that he has never seen a feast this lavish, even on his own birthday. Turan sweat drops, realizing this extreme hospitality is almost certainly a trap. The mother starts speaking, bringing up the magic tool Aziz promised him. She asks Turan if he has a specific type of magic item in mind. Turan requests a defensive artifact that can protect him from sudden stealth attacks. She agrees but notes they do not have anything of that caliber ready immediately. A smug young noble named Mello speaks up, offering to craft the defensive item himself. He suggests embedding protective mana into a ring or necklace so Turan can carry it at all times. He estimates the custom enchantment process will take about a month. The father brags that Mello is a genius enchanter whose work is highly prized by the main house. Turan worries the gift is a bit too excessive, but the mother insists his life debt is worth far more. She formally invites him to stay at their mansion as an honored guest for the next month. The next morning, Turan and Aziz take a stroll through the bustling streets of Zabalin. Aziz notes that his mother has taken a massive liking to him, comparing his talent to Mesa's. Turan realizes her generous hospitality is just a clever recruitment strategy to bind him to their house. Aziz laughs, explaining that his mother always starts by giving gifts before introducing a pretty girl to seal the deal. He assures Turan he won't be forced to marry anyone as his mother is far too refined for that. Turan mentions he promised to train with Mesa in the evening, asking if they have plans. Aziz grins, dragging him along to patrol the city and enjoy the local entertainment first. Turan sighs, admitting he was planning to spend the day training. Aziz literally drags him across the cobblestones, telling him life is too short to spend it entirely on schoolwork. They hit the local casino, watching the roulette wheel spin. Turan looks completely out of place, while Aziz is having the time of his life. They stop by a tavern, enjoying the lively city atmosphere. While walking through a market, Turan's eyes catch a notice board. He stops, staring at a specific poster. The poster features a very familiar scar-nosed face. Turan's eyes widen in absolute shock. It is a theater poster featuring Kiorn. He recalls the old knight's warm smile from their mountain cabin. The scene shifts to a stage where actors are clashing wooden swords. The play depicts the legendary exploits of the warriors of Arabian in the Demon Desert. The actor playing Kiorn defeats the enemy with a dramatic flourish. Aziz claps enthusiastically from the audience, while Turan watches with a quiet smile. Aziz asks him if the play was worth watching, and Turan nods quietly. He remembers Kiorn's absolute humility, calling himself just an ordinary knight. Turan resolves to ask the old man if those grand stage stories are actually true the next time they meet. The next morning, sunlight streams through Turan's bedroom window. He opens his eyes, feeling a massive presence looming over him. Haram Berg is sitting right next to his pillow, giving him a terrifying stare. He asks Turan if his body is fully rested and commands him to follow him. Turan rubs his eyes, wondering what this giant muscle man is doing in his room at dawn. Haram explains it is tempering time, as bodies do not grow stronger by lounging in soft noble beds. Turan agrees to go, realizing physical training will benefit his combat stats. Aziz bursts into the room, excitedly talking about a new theater performance. He instantly freezes when he sees his terrifying uncle standing there. Haram invites him to join their morning workout to fix his weak noble body. Aziz screams and runs away at supersonic speed, claiming he has not recovered yet. Turan watches him go, wondering why the guy is so absolutely terrified of a little exercise. 10 minutes later, Turan is sweating bullets, his face twisted in absolute agony. He is performing weighted push-ups with a massive iron plate stacked on his back. His arms tremble violently as Haram demands one more repetition. Haram finally tells him that is enough for the physical set. Turan collapses onto the gym floor, gasping for air like a fish out of water. Haram asks if it is tiring, and Turan weakly groans a yes. Haram notes that as a wizard, Turan only needs to forge his body once. He explains that normal humans lose their conditioning if they stop training, but mages have constant mana circulating through their veins, locking their physical muscles in peak steel condition forever. Haram smiles warmly, telling him he must be fully rested now. Turan panics, trying to explain that his body is still actively screaming in pain. Haram ignores him, announcing it is time to move on to high-intensity weapon combat training. Turan's scream of absolute agony echoes through the massive gym. Over the next 3 weeks, Turan's schedule becomes a brutal routine. In the mornings, he trains with Haram in a high-gravity chamber that makes his limbs feel like lead. In the evenings, he meets Mesa in the garden to practice static electricity and lightning manipulation. The sun sets over the grand training grounds. A bolt of blue lightning misses the target entirely, blasting the dirt path. Turan sighs, looking at his smoking fingers. Mesa smirks, teasing him for struggling so much with basic aiming. Turan smiles, explaining it is simply because he does not possess the natural Arabian bloodline affinity. Mesa admits she can't help him aim, since for her, lightning just naturally goes where she wants it to. Suddenly, a voice calls out to Mesa from the garden path. An Arabian messenger approaches, looking highly tense. He stops, giving Turan a highly suspicious look. Mesa tells him to state his business, reminding him she ordered the main house not to disturb her recovery. The messenger reveals that the patriarch has issued an emergency summons for her. He explains that dark elves have launched a massive, coordinated invasion in the south. 3 major cities have already fallen to their necromancy forces, and the family is assembling an elite expedition force. Tehran's expression turns dead serious. The small skirmish in the woods was just the opening wave of a massive war. The Dark Elves have launched a massive, coordinated offensive, and 3 southern cities have already fallen. Tehran looks on quietly, realizing this is not just a minor border skirmish anymore. Mesa tells the messenger she will return to the main house immediately to join the war effort. She sighs, knowing her peaceful recovery days at the Burke estate are officially over. But before she packs her bags, she tells Tehran she needs to pay her debt for that rat-decaying magic lesson. She claps her hands together, her pride refusing to let her leave while owing a commoner a favor. She asks Tehran if he knows that electricity naturally flows through the human body as well. Tehran looks at her, mildly curious about where this science lesson is going. Mesa smirks, claiming this is the absolute pinnacle secret art of the Arabian household. She proposes teaching him the concept properly to settle their score, and Tehran agrees it would be highly useful. She explains that whenever a person senses something, tiny electrical signals travel from their nerves straight to the brain. Tehran closes his eyes, instantly visualizing the concept. He focuses on his own nervous system, visualizing the minute electrical charges firing. He sees the pathways of electricity flowing throughout his entire physical body. And then, he applies the Arabian trick. He uses his mana to accelerate those electrical signals. The energy surges through his legs, his nerves firing at 10 times their normal speed. His eyes snap open, crackling with a faint spark of blue electricity. Mesa is still standing there, preparing to give a long, complicated explanation. She asks him how he feels, expecting him to be completely confused, but Tehran is already staring at his hands. His perception of time slowed down to an absolute crawl. He chuckles, asking her if this is the secret art she was talking about. The sheer speed of his nerve acceleration sends a violent shockwave through his brain. He stumbles back, clutching his head as a massive, high-voltage migraine hits him. Mesa smiles, noting that he actually pulled it off on his very first attempt. She warns him the headache is normal for beginners, but admits this spell is far too valuable to be traded for his rat trick. She leaps back, her feet leaving the stone floor. She tells him to consider this an investment, promising to collect the debt with interest once he learns something even better. She floats away into the sky, leaving our guy standing alone in the garden. Tehran sighs, rubbing his temples as the electrical static fades from his mind. High above, a hunting falcon screeches as it circles the castle city of Zabalin. The bird glides through the clouds, overlooking the grand streets below. In the city square, a massive crowd of commoners has gathered to watch the soldiers. Elite knights stand in perfect formation, their dark cloaks matching their polished armor. This is Morgan City, the bustling center of the Dakin Plains. The crowd cheers wildly, shouting glory to Arabian as the expedition force prepares to march. Aziz comments that it is just a departure ceremony, but the sheer enthusiasm makes it look like a victory parade. Suddenly, Aziz spots someone in the crowd and his face lights up. He waves frantically, yelling for his cousin Mason to look over here. His father quickly grabs his arm, telling him to maintain his composure as a noble. The herald screams that the head of the house is entering the square. Heavy footsteps echo on the stone as the crowd falls dead silent. Tehran watches closely as the guard line parts. A tall, imposing figure with long, messy hair walks out into the sunlight. He wears a heavy, dark cloak and silver armor, carrying a massive presence. This is Badal Arabian, the legendary current head of the Arabian household. Tehran notes that the patriarch looks incredibly pale, wondering if his health is failing. Aziz whispers that Badal was severely injured years ago during a duel with the head of the Zahar house. The patriarch raises his hand, his mana flaring to quiet the crowd. The commoners look up in absolute awe, their bated breath hanging in the air. A young boy stares up, his eyes reflecting the dark clouds gathering overhead. The sky turns pitch black in an instant, thick storm clouds rolling in. The entire city is cast into shadow as the wind begins to howl. A massive, roaring crack of yellow lightning splits the sky. The blinding light illuminates the faces of the terrified citizens. The crowd goes wild, cheering for the Lord of Thunder to protect his descendants. Tehran is deeply impressed, noting that even in a weakened state, Badal easily blankets the entire territory in storm mana. Dozens of lightning bolts rain down, striking the spires of the castle. This is the absolute peak of elemental magic a human can achieve. Tehran stares at the lightning, resolving to reach that level of power one day. The scene shifts to the Burke workshop, where Mello hands Tehran a braided leather bracelet. Mello explains that simply wearing it boosts physical stamina, and injecting mana increases the effect tenfold. He warns him that maintaining the boost consumes a massive amount of mana, so he should use it sparingly. Tehran inspects the bracelet, genuinely amazed by the clean craftsmanship. He thanks Mello, noting that a custom piece like this would be rare even in the greatest noble houses. Aziz's mother steps forward, asking Tehran if he has any interest in formally joining their house. Tehran politely declines, saying he has urgent travels and cannot settle down in one place. She smiles softly, saying she already heard the stories from Aziz and won't force him. Tehran bows, telling her he will never forget the hospitality he received from the Burke family. Later, Tehran walks down the stone hallway, preparing to head out. He hears footsteps behind him and stops. Haram Berg and Aziz are standing there, waiting to say their goodbyes. Haram tosses a small, leather-sheathed object toward him. He explains it is a custom magic dagger, nothing flashy, but incredibly durable and sharp. Tehran hugs the dagger to his chest, a genuine smile on his face. He looks up and quietly says, "Thank you, master." Haram's stoic face instantly breaks into a massive, proud smirk. He turns around and walks away, trying to hide how absolutely thrilled he is by that title. Aziz steps up, throwing a heavy black cloak over Tehran's shoulders. Tehran looks at the high-grade fabric, asking what this is for. Aziz grins, reminding him he was jealous of his self-cleaning clothes and presenting a matching set of pants and shirts. Tehran looks at him, deeply moved by the gesture. Aziz smiles warmly, telling him he is a good friend who gave him a lot to think about during their short time together. He asks Tehran where he plans to go next, and Tehran replies that he is heading east. Aziz warns him that if he is crossing to Carmane, he should avoid taking a ship because the waves are absolutely brutal. Tehran smiles, secretly knowing he has to brave those waves to reach the Zahar homeland in the Elril Desert. Aziz tells him to return safely and pay him back for the cloak eventually, and just like that, Tehran is back on the dirt road, walking past the golden wheat fields. He is alone again, but this time he has a high-tier cloak, a magic dagger, and a stamina-boosting bracelet. He stops, looking down at his boots. He decides it is time to test his newly tempered physical body and starts to run. A traveling merchant looks back in absolute confusion. Tehran is sprinting across the plains like a human bullet, leaving a massive dust trail behind him. His legs pump with incredible speed, his strides covering yards of ground in seconds. He blasts past carriages, forests, and hills in a blur of movement. He leaps over a crest, the wind howling in his ears as his stamina limits are pushed. He slides to a halt, his boots kicking up dirt as he catches his breath. He looks up at the towering mountains in the distance, feeling completely energized. He enters a dense, dark forest, the tall pine trees blocking out the sun. Tehran's nose twitches as he picks up a distinct scent in the air. He stops, his tracking instincts immediately going on high alert. It is not the smell of a normal campfire, but something far more sickening, the unmistakable scent of burning flesh. His eyes go wide, and he sprints toward the source of the smell. He breaks through the tree line and freezes. A nearby commoner village has been completely destroyed. He walks past a charred wooden stake, a horrific skull hanging from it. Dozens of blackened bodies are tied to stakes, the entire town reduced to smoking ash. He wanders through the ruins, wondering if dark elves managed to push this far north. Suddenly, his sharp Zahar ears pick up a tiny, muffled sound nearby. He follows the noise to a collapsed wooden building. He spots a hidden trapdoor buried under heavy, charred floorboards. He drops to one knee, clearing the ash away. He grabs the heavy iron handle of the trapdoor and easily rips the heavy wood and stone debris aside. He peers down into the pitch-black cellar. A terrified little black-haired girl is cowering in the corner of the stone basement. She screams in absolute terror as the light hits her face. Tehran slowly descends the stairs with his hands up, telling her to calm down because he is not an enemy. The little girl tears up, looking at him with trembling eyes. Tehran kneels down, gently asking her what happened to her village. She weeps, whispering that a terrifying mage came and killed everyone. Before she can say more, she collapses onto the stone floor from sheer exhaustion. Tehran scoops her up, checking her pulse and realizing she is just drained from hiding for so long. He carries her up the stairs, planning to get her to a safe town immediately, but as he steps out into the sunlight, a sharp whistling sound cuts the air. He looks up just in time to see a glowing blue arrow pointed straight at his forehead. A blonde female archer and her squad have him completely surrounded. She barks at him to get on his knees immediately. She glares at him, calling him a murderous bastard as she tightens her grip on the bow. The archer has her bow fully drawn, her eyes filled with absolute fury. She screams at him to drop to his knees, her ice arrow crackling with freezing mana. Tehran stands perfectly still, holding the sleeping girl close to his chest. She yells, asking if massacring the entire village wasn't enough, accusing him of trying to kidnap a child. A wizard in her squad steps up, his hand glowing with a flame spell. Tehran calmly tells them this is a massive misunderstanding, but the nervous wizard loses his cool and launches a massive fire blast at him. The explosion tears through the path, swallowing Tehran in a wall of flames. The archer screams at her ally, calling him an idiot for firing when there was a child right there. Her eyes go wide with shock as the smoke begins to clear. A glowing blue shield of mana slowly emerges from the ash. Turan is standing completely unharmed, his hand extended to maintain the barrier. He looks at Mello's defensive bracelet, glad he received it before embarking on this trip. The squad is speechless, noting that he blocked a direct fire spell without sustaining a single burn mark. Turan turns his back, his dark cloak swirling around him. The archer sweats, wondering what kind of absurd bloodline defensive magic this guy possesses. Turan repeats that he didn't attack this village, but warns them he won't just stand and defend himself next time. The archer lowers her bow slightly, her anger fading into confusion. The little girl in his arms is breathing peacefully, completely unharmed by the blast. An older knight in her squad agrees that a mass murderer wouldn't waste energy protecting a survivor. She introduces herself as Bison and asks for his name. Our guy simply replies, Turan. A squad member asks how they can believe his story when he was found at the scene of the crime. Turan tells them to simply ask the child when she wakes up, as she saw the real culprit. Bison gasps, asking if the girl actually saw the face of the killer. She asks if she saw the notorious arsonist. Turan looks at her, admitting he has no idea who that is. Bison's face darkens, explaining that he is the mad mage who committed this horrific atrocity. She explains that for months, this killer has been burning isolated villages alive, leaving 0 survivors. The only thing the world knows about this mysterious killer is his title, the arsonist. Later, the little girl wakes up, describing a scary man in a red cloak with a thick beard. The squad listens closely, realizing they finally have a solid lead on the killer's appearance. Bizen looks over at Turan, feeling deeply embarrassed about her earlier hostility. She bows deeply, apologizing for her rude behavior and for pointing a weapon at their benefactor. Turan watches her, noting that some nobles let their sense of duty override their common sense. He remembers Midon, thinking that Bison is a good, honest leader who prioritized the child's safety first. Bison explains they rushed over because they saw fresh smoke, hoping to catch the culprit this time. She confidently states they will find him soon because they have a natural tracker in their squad. Turan asks if the tracker is from the legendary Zahar family. Bison laughs, clarifying that she is Bison Carmaine, and her friends are from their vassal families. She points to her gray-haired friend Asha, who carries a weak, primitive Zahar bloodline that grants tracking but no stealth. Bison turns to Turan, her expression turning formal. She asks him if he would be willing to help them hunt down the arsonist. She offers him the entire bounty reward and her share of the monster mana, only wanting the official merit for her house. Turan asks about the arsonist's power level. Bison warns him that the killer easily slaughtered several trained knights, meaning he is a noble-level mage. Turan smiles inwardly, realizing a noble-level target is exactly what he needs to expand his mana pool. He agrees to the hunt, making Bison's face light up with joy. First, they travel to a peaceful village nearby to secure the child. Turan hands a heavy pouch of silver coins to a local, securing her safety and upbringing. He pats her head, promising to return in a few years to check in on her. The villager looks at the massive bag of money, his hands trembling in shock. The scene shifts back to the smoking ruins of the destroyed village. Asha closes her eyes, focusing her tracking magic. She leads the group through the forest path, her eyes glowing blue as she tracks the residual mana. Bizen asks which way the target went, and Asha points toward the mountain trail. They follow her through a dry, sandy canyon. They pass a fallen tree trunk, the wood cleanly severed. Asha sniffs the air, her primitive tracking traits working flawlessly. Turan asks her how exactly she is tracking him across this rocky terrain. She explains she is following the scent of fresh ash residue clinging to his clothes. Turan is impressed by her professional methods, realizing she is highly capable despite her weak bloodline. Asha's eyes snap open as she spots a clue. She sprints ahead, with Bison calling out for her to slow down. They reach a massive, rocky cliff face overlooking the forest. A dark, ominous cave opening sits at the base of the mountain. Bison tells Turan to advance with her while the rest of the squad stands guard outside. She conjures a glowing sphere of light in her hand. They slowly enter the damp, dark cavern, their footsteps echoing on the stone. Bison whispers, asking if the tracker is sure someone is inside. Asha nods, sweating as she senses a single massive presence ahead. They turn the corner, the light illuminating the cavern walls. Bison's face goes completely serious as she spots a shadow. A burning torch is mounted on the wall, casting long, dancing shadows. A hooded man in a red cloak is standing with his back turned to them. The arsonist slowly turns around, his crazed, wild eyes locking onto the intruders. Turan sniffs the air, confirming this is the exact scent of the burnt village. Bison draws her bow, demanding to know if he is the monster who burned those innocent people. The arsonist gives a mad, toothless grin, claiming he doesn't know what she is talking about. Suddenly, he thrusts his hand forward, his red eyes glowing with fire mana. A massive, violent explosion of fire erupts from his palm. The blast throws the squad back, setting the gray-haired wizard on fire. Turan thrusts his hand out, Mello's bracelet glowing brightly. A solid blue mana shield completely blocks the flames, protecting Bison and himself. The arsonist looks on in absolute shock as his ultimate spell is neutralized. Bison releases her arrow, the ice projectile cutting through the smoke. The arrow strikes the arsonist's shoulder, spraying blood against the stone wall. He stumbles back, his hand clutching the wound. He roars in pain, slamming his bloody hand against the cave floor. A massive hand made of solid stone rises from the ground, reaching for them. Turan is surprised, noting that this guy can manipulate earth magic in addition to fire. The giant stone hand smashes down, but Turan slides under it with perfect ease. He sprints toward the killer, drawing Haram's magic dagger. The arsonist reaches out to grab him, his face twisted in rage. But Turan is too fast, a single clean slash severing the killer's arm at the elbow. The arsonist screams in agony as a geyser of blood erupts. Turan snaps his fingers, channeling Mesa's electrical nerve acceleration concept. He unleashes a massive, high-voltage lightning strike directly into the killer's chest. The electrical currents overload the arsonist's nervous system, paralyzing him instantly. The giant stone hand crumbles to pieces, dropping Bison safely onto the stone floor. The arsonist lies defeated on the ground, his body twitching from the shock. Bison asks if he took him down, and Turan tells her to check on her injured teammates while he secures the prisoner. Turan pulls a handful of seeds from his pocket. He tosses them onto the blood-soaked floorboards. He commands them to sprout, and the thick blue vines tightly bind the killer's limbs. He blindfolds the arsonist, completely sealing his sight and movement. Turan slaps him awake, holding the sharp edge of Haram's dagger against his throat. The arsonist gives a bloody, deranged grin under the bandage. Turan warns him that if he channels even a drop of mana, he will end him on the spot. Bison and her squad watch in silence as Turan demands to know why a noble is burning commoners alive. The killer falls silent for a long moment. Turan drives the dagger into his thigh, making him scream in agony to break his resolve. He coldly demands an answer, saying a merciless murderer deserves no pity. The arsonist weeps, screaming that a divine voice told him to burn the flesh and souls of sinners. Bison and her squad look on, completely disgusted by his insane ramblings. The killer laughs maniacally, claiming he was taught the secret to obtaining other bloodlines. He screams that if he just burns a few more mages, he will finally unlock the power of the flames. Bison sighs, muttering that this is just the delusional madness of a psychopath. Turan starts to smile, a chilling, sharp look entering his eyes. But his mind is racing, realizing this madman might have stumbled onto a fundamental truth. He recalls how commoners gain raw physical power by killing demonic beasts. He remembers Midan's final words about wizards absorbing mana to level up. He realizes that if killing monsters increases mana, then burning human mages might actually allow someone to steal their soul's bloodline. He grips the dagger hilt, his hand shaking slightly as the realization hits him. He stares down at the twitching killer, realizing he has just discovered the absolute darkest secret of how this entire world operates. Our guy Turan doesn't do long villain monologues. He just slashes the arsonist's throat mid-sentence. No hesitation, no drama, just a clean execution while the rest of the squad is still processing what happened. The younger knight looks completely horrified, pale as a ghost. He mutters that killing a bound, defenseless prisoner feels less like combat and more like slaughtering livestock. Peasant immediately shuts him down, telling him to stop being a soft, emotional fool. She points out that this monster burned entire villages alive, so making him suffer would still be too merciful. Meanwhile, Turan is already looting the body like a seasoned RPG player looking for rare drops. He picks up a small, weathered leather journal the arsonist dropped. He opens it, finding maps of the scorched villages and weird scribbled formulas. He turns the page and his eyes go wide. The pages are filled with bizarre bloodline combination formulas he has never seen in his entire life. He wonders if a god actually wrote this. Bison walks over, snapping him out of his thoughts. She tells him the arsonist is dead, so it is time to collect the magical payout. Turan absorbs the dead mage's green mana, feeling his internal reserves expand as the power flows into his body. The scene shifts to a city official handing Bison a wooden reward box. He congratulates her, calling her a rising star of the Carmane family for taking down such a high-tier threat. Bison explains they are planning to travel further south to hunt more monsters. She hands Turan his share of the gold, a heavy bag of coins clinking in his palm. Turan bids them farewell, announcing he is heading straight to the port city of Abacha. Bison whispers a final warning, promising she won't blab about the arsonist's weird bloodline-stealing theories to avoid absolute chaos. The squad waves goodbye as they head out on their next quest. Turan watches them leave, keeping the cryptic diary safely tucked away in his self-mending cloak. He begins his trek across the scorching desert sands. Walking alone, the vast dunes stretching out to the horizon. His skin prickles as he notices the air starting to feel heavy and humid. He snaps his fingers to test the local atmospheric conditions. A tiny flame flickers. The high humidity means fire magic consumes way more mana and deals less damage here. On the other hand, water magic is going to be incredibly easy to manifest. A massive sphere of water easily forms around his hand with barely any mana consumption, which means he is finally approaching his destination. He steps over the final dune, the sun shining brightly over the horizon. The grand port city of Abacha stands before him, overlooking a massive, shimmering blue ocean. He enters a local tavern, looking for a ship crew heading east. At a nearby table, a rugged captain is chugging down a mug of ale. The captain complains about having to sail back to the dreadful Emerald Desert with merfolk constantly throwing harpoons at their hull. His crewmates look worried, muttering about the relentless pirate fleets patrolling those waters. The captain adjusted his eye patch, groaning that they are desperate to hire a skilled combat knight to protect them. Tehran steps up behind him, asking if they are setting sail tomorrow. The captain looks him up and down, rudely stating that their ship is not a luxury liner and they don't have room for useless baggage. He tells him that taking a passenger means leaving behind a barrel of booze, which goes against his sacred pirate principles. Tehran doesn't argue. He just gently taps his finger on the captain's glass. The entire glass instantly freezes solid, ice crawling over the table in a display of perfect elemental control. The captain drops his jaw, his eye patch almost popping off in shock. He immediately stands up, asking what a great, powerful knight is doing in a humble place like this. Tehran tells him to relax, asking for passage to the Emerald Desert in exchange for his services. He explains he will act as their official security guard, easily fending off any pirates or merfolk that attack. The captain hesitates, admitting they are too poor to provide a room worthy of a high-class knight's status. Tehran waves it off, saying he doesn't care about the luxury as long as he gets to the desert. The captain stands up, slamming his hands on the table with a massive grin. He welcomes him aboard, thrilled to have secured a human cheat code for free. The wooden merchant ship slides out of the harbor, setting sail on the open blue water. Meanwhile, deep in the southern war zone, an entire castle city is engulfed in a sea of flames. The Dark Elf offensive has completely devastated the regional human defenses, buildings crumbling into ash. A young human soldier is running for his life, his breath ragged as he grips his sword. A grotesque, muscular dark elf beast leaps from the fire with bared fangs. The soldier barely parries, the impact throwing him backward onto the blood-soaked ground. Another dark elf lunges from his blind spot, ready to finish him off. The soldier closes his eyes, preparing for death. Suddenly, a massive strike of lightning vaporizes the attacking dark elf to ash. The remaining beasts look up, their yellow eyes widening in sheer terror. The soldier gasps, staring at the sky as the dark clouds begin to swirl violently. The entire sky flashes with a brilliant, blinding yellow storm energy. Mesa Arabian stands in the center of the battlefield, her robes fluttering as lightning rains down like a localized apocalypse. The lightning strikes are absolute, vaporizing the dark elf vanguard in a single frame. The soldier stands up, completely stunned by the overwhelming display of power. Mesa slowly descends from the sky, looking like a literal goddess of thunder. The soldier thanks her profusely, but she coldly orders him to rejoin his unit immediately. He runs off, and Mesa watches his back with her usual silent, brooding stare. A muscular man with copper-orange hair floats down behind her. This is Kadram Arabian, the vice-captain of the subjugation force. He asks if she is hurt. Mesa coldly replies she is fine. Kadram tells her not to push herself, saying her life is worth more than a few low-tier knights. Mesa asks how the battle is going. Kadram says they are reclaiming the area, though they haven't found the Dark Elf tunnels yet. Mesa tells him to alert her the second they find them, as she plans to clear them herself. She flies off in a blast of wind, completely ignoring his patronizing tone. Kadram watches her leave, a disgusting, jealous smirk creeping onto his face. He mutters about her being an insolent, arrogant brat who was raised far too recklessly. He coldly muses that she will likely end up dead, just like her mother and younger brother, if she keeps this up. The scene shifts back to the deep blue ocean, waves crashing violently against the wooden hull. Tehran's ship is cruising through the open water, sails fully unfurled. Tehran stands at the deck railing, looking out at the endless horizon. He wonders how on earth he is going to find any clues about his parents once he reaches Zahar. The sailors are busy mopping the deck and adjusting the rigging around him. All he has is a few minor heirlooms and a crude hand-drawn portrait of his mother's face. He sighs, realizing finding answers with just a drawing is going to be a massive needle-in-a-haystack quest. The captain walks up, clapping his shoulder and joking that he's going to burn a hole in the seabed if he stares any harder. Tehran smiles, lying that he was just thinking about how incredibly vast the ocean is. The captain laughs, asking if our guy is handling the seasickness all right since landfolk usually puke their guts out. He notes that Tehran has even been learning sailing tricks, rope tying, and sail handling from their boatswain. Tehran says he just thought having that knowledge would be useful, and seafaring is actually pretty interesting. A sailor bellows from below deck that it is officially mealtime. The captain cheers, rubbing his hands together and leading the way to the dining hall. Tehran sits with the crew, eating a plate of dry salted meat and pickled cabbage. A veteran sailor explains that the sour cabbage is the only thing keeping them from dying of a horrific gum disease called scurvy. Tehran is fascinated, asking how they discovered such a specific remedy. The sailor laughs, mentioning that before they figured it out, sailors used to eat raw merfolk to survive. Suddenly, a lookout screams from the crow's nest, spotting a ship at 2 o'clock. The crew panics, grabbing telescopes to scan the water. The approaching vessel is flying absolutely no house crest or merchant flag. The veteran sailor spits, stating that on a clear day like this, things were going way too smoothly for them not to be pirates. The crew rushes to the armory, pulling axes, spears, and swords from the barrels. The captain looks through his telescope, noting the enemy ship is faster and will easily catch them if they try to run. He prepares to navigate toward a nearby island, his expression dead serious. He looks over at Tehran, asking his high-tier security guard if he is ready for a fight. Tehran smiles confidently, saying that as long as there are no noble-level mages on board, there is absolutely no problem. The captain grins, ordering his men to turn the ship and prepare to engage. The two ships close the distance, carving white foam through the blue water. The pirate crew stands at the railing, laughing and screaming for them to stop their ship if they want to live. Tehran asks the captain if pirates actually spare people, and the captain laughs, saying they usually just chop your legs off first. Tehran smiles, stepping onto the railing. He leaps across the gap between the two ships, his black cloak billowing in the wind. He lands flawlessly on the pirate deck, drawing his sword in a single fluid motion. The pirates freeze in absolute shock, completely unprepared for a solo boarding action. Tehran taps his foot against the wooden deck, channeling his water magic. The water surrounding the ship begins to swell and boil. Dozens of massive razor-sharp ice spears shoot out of the ocean, hovering around the pirate deck. The ice spears rain down, impaling the pirates before they can even raise their shields. Tehran looks at the surviving scum, his expression turning cold and ruthless. He raises his glowing blue hand, deciding there is absolutely no reason to go easy on them. A massive pirate thug tries to rally the survivors, screaming that they have to kill him if they want to survive. They charge him in a desperate mob, but Tehran's perception is already overclocked. He summons a massive torrent of water, shaping it into a roaring elemental whip. The water whip freezes mid-air, turning into a massive blade of solid ice. He swings the ice blade, cleanly slicing through their weapons and armor. He executes a series of perfect high-speed physical strikes, showing off the results of Haram's brutal training. The pirates keep coming, but Tehran parries their strikes effortlessly, his movements completely fluid. He spins, a circular water slash cleaving through the front line. He drives his sword through the chest of a pirate, his physical strength easily overpowering their defenses. He vaults over a swinging axe, delivering a brutal kick that launches a thug over the railing. Another pirate lunges from his blind spot, driving a dagger straight into Tehran's neck. The thug smirks, thinking he has secured an easy kill. But Tehran doesn't even flinch, his eyes turning to glare at his attacker. The pirate screams in pain as ice spikes suddenly burst from his own shadow, impaling him. Another pirate grabs Tehran from behind, pinning his arms and screaming for his buddies to finish him off. Two pirates sprint forward, driving their swords straight into Tehran's chest. The impact is loud, but the pirate's smirk quickly turns into a look of sheer terror. His eyes go wide as he realizes his steel blade didn't even scratch Tehran's skin. Mello's defensive bracelet is glowing brightly under Tehran's cloak, completely absorbing the kinetic energy. Tehran looks at them with a flat, bored expression. The defense item is actually incredibly broken. He snaps his fingers, and a blast of water magic blows the pirate behind him to pieces. He spins, a series of rapid slashes clearing the remaining attackers in a spray of blood. He leaps into the air, executing a flawless, wind-boosted diving strike. The entire deck is swept clean, the remaining pirates collapsing onto the blood-soaked wood. The pirate ship falls completely silent, the sails flapping uselessly in the wind. Tehran stands in the center of the carnage, his glowing ice sword slowly dissolving into mist. The entire pirate crew has been completely wiped out in less than 5 minutes. The merchant captain boards the ship, laughing heartily at the absolute massacre. He jokes that Turan cleaned house so perfectly his own sailors won't have any work left to do. The merchant sailors cheer wildly, raising their weapons and praising the invincible knight who just saved them. The captain asks if he needs to see the ship's doctor, but Turan assures him he is completely unharmed. He points out that all the blood covering his cloak belongs to the pirates, and Aziz's self-cleaning fabric is already washing it away. The captain explains they searched the vessel and discovered it was actually a stolen merchant ship from Abacha. He sits with Turan in the cabin, explaining that the pirates gave it a cheap paint job to hide their crimes. He formally congratulates Turan, stating that since he soloed the entire crew, the ownership rights of the ship belong entirely to him. Turan looks confused, asking what on earth a wandering shepherd is supposed to do with a giant pirate ship. The captain suggests selling it at the North Sea archipelago, which is directly on their route to the desert. He explains that the archipelago is always desperate for ships, so they can easily sell it for a premium price. However, navigating a ship of this size requires a full crew, so they will need to use the merchant sailors. Turan pragmatically proposes leaving the entire sale to the captain in exchange for a clean 20% cut of the profits. The captain laughs hysterically, thrilled by the highly reasonable business deal. He promises to use his personal connections at the port to secure the absolute highest price possible. Suddenly, a panicked sailor bursts into the cabin, screaming that they found a mermaid in the lower hold. The captain jumps up in shock, wondering if they are being attacked by sea monsters. The sailor clarifies that the pirates captured a merfolk and were keeping it locked up in a cage downstairs. Turan looks intrigued, realizing this might be a highly valuable find. They walk down the stairs, the captain commenting on how much mainland nobles love buying exotic sea creatures. They enter the dark, damp storage hold, navigating past the heavy cargo crates. Turan asks if merfolk usually fetch a high price on the market. The captain confirms it, saying rich nobles with more money than sense will lose their minds over anything mystical. He points to a heavy wooden door at the back of the hold. Turan steps inside, his eyes narrowing as he scans the dark room. A young, blue-scaled merman boy is tied up with heavy ropes, sitting on the floor. The boy looks up, giving them a fierce, defiant glare despite his bound state. The captain sighs, disappointed to see it as a male merman, as rich nobles have zero interest in buying mermen. The boy snaps, screaming at the filthy land plebeians to show some proper respect. He proudly claims to be Armani, the 47th Prince of North Astad. The captain assumes he is just bluffing to save his skin. Turan asks him to turn into a fish to prove his royal status, but Armani complains he can't do it while tied up and out of water. He claims he can only transform if he is in the open sea and in perfect physical condition. The captain mutters that the brat is clearly lying, asking Turan if they should just execute him since merfolk are known to eat humans. Turan looks at the shivering boy, slowly drawing his dagger and agreeing he isn't worth any money anyway. The captain agrees, saying letting him into the sea would just make them look like fools if he runs away. Turan raises his glowing blue hand, preparing a freezing strike to end it. Armani panics, screaming that he has never eaten a human in his entire life and has never even thought about it. His eyes fill with tears, his teeth bared in absolute terror. He desperately bargains, promising to give them a legendary treasure if they spare his life. He claims the treasure was left behind by the goddess Freya, whom humans worship. He describes a legendary glowing relic left by the divine being. Turan's eyes narrow. A relic of Freya is exactly the kind of high-tier cheat code he needs. He lowers his hand, realizing the boy's story might actually be genuine. The scene shifts to a tiny, isolated rocky island surrounded by a glowing sunset. The merchant ship docks at a port city nearby, the crew celebrating their survival. The captain asks Turan if he has reached a decision, and Turan says the treasure is nearby and he will return tonight. Turan prepares a small rowboat, securing Armani with heavy iron chains. Armani complains about the chains, asking if Turan really thinks a royal prince would break his promise. Turan quietly rows the boat out into the dark, moonlit water, ignoring his whining. He tells him that if the treasure is real, he will let him go as promised. Armani scoffs, warning him not to blame him if the Freya relic is too powerful for a human to handle. The rowboat glides through the dark waves under a massive full moon. Turan dives into the deep, glowing blue water, swimming down toward the ocean floor. He navigates through the kelp forests, his physical conditioning making the swim effortless. Suddenly, a massive, ancient stone serpent structure emerges from the darkness. Turan swims toward the colossal ruins, looking like a tiny speck against the ancient architecture, getting backseated by a hostage merman prince who is complaining about landfolks having zero taste in treasure. Turan, of course, is completely unfazed. He's got that classic "I am only here for the loot" look on his face. Armani points to a dark, jagged island on the horizon, claiming the ancient Freyan treasure is right there. But Turan isn't about to walk into an obvious trap. He steps out of the boat, gets his feet wet, and immediately channels his conceptual magic, whispering, "Search." He projects his mana straight through the water, scanning the depths below for any sign of a merfolk ambush party waiting to turn him into fish bait. Luckily, the scan comes back completely clean. No hidden army, just fish. Armani actually kept his word. They pull the boat onto the dark, rocky shore of the island, landing on a quiet, foggy beach surrounded by dense, silent woods. Armani is shuffling along in his chains, mumbling about how he remembers the location clearly, while Turan walks behind him like a very tired dog walker. Suddenly, the kid stops and points into the trees. Turan looks ahead, wondering what kind of ancient temple they've stumbled upon, only to find a completely normal-looking forest pond reflecting the moonlight. Turan asks if it's deep, and Armani casually drops that it's only about 300 meters down. 300 meters. In pitch-black water. Turan just stares at him. Without saying a single word, Turan pulls out a thick rope and starts wrapping it around a nearby tree trunk. Armani immediately starts throwing a tantrum, asking if he's being tied up again because Turan doesn't trust him. He screams that if Turan goes down there and dies, he's going to starve to death while tied to a pine tree. Turan just tells him to pray that doesn't happen, and dives straight into the freezing dark water without a second thought. He takes one last deep breath of air, and plunges into the dark blue abyss, leaving the prince behind. Once his eyes adjust to the darkness, Turan swims deeper, his silver hair flowing in the cold water as he navigates the silent ocean. Down here, the ruins finally start to appear. Glowing, moss-covered structures carved directly into the seabed. He swims through the underwater valley, looking around for the relic, and his eyes suddenly go wide as he spots something massive. It is a giant, petrified stone serpent, wrapping its massive coils around the ancient sea rocks. Turan swims closer, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the stone beast. He follows the serpent's body upward, looking for whatever is hidden at the peak, and right on top of the giant snake's head, he sees a lone figure sitting in complete silence. The figure is clad in heavy, ancient armor, frozen in time. Turan gasps, letting out a small bubble of air as the realization hits him. He quickly covers his mouth, reminding himself that he is currently 300 meters underwater and cannot breathe. He swims down to the stone head, approaching the armored warrior who is sitting perfectly preserved on the statue. Turan stares at the figure. It looks like a knight, but the scale of the magic here is unlike anything he's seen. He looks closer at the face, noticing the pale, cold features of the warrior sitting beneath the dark waves. The body hasn't decayed at all. It didn't even turn into a wraith. Turan realizes this must be one of the legendary Freyans, preserved by pure, ancient mana. As he examines the armor, he notices a golden round object hanging from the warrior's belt. It is a heavy golden compass, glowing with a soft, warm light that cuts through the dark water. Meanwhile, back on the surface, Armani is still tied to the tree, looking extremely pathetic and bored. Suddenly, the water bursts open as Turan surfaces, gasping for air. Armani immediately screams, asking if he actually found the treasure. Turan climbs out of the water, calmly confirming that he did. He looks down at the golden compass in his hand and channels his mana into it. A bright blue flame ignites inside the device, reflecting in Armani's wide, glowing eyes. Turan realizes this relic is a high-tier detector, allowing him to sense the presence of living things and internal energy signatures over a massive distance. He raises his hand toward Armani and casts a quick spell, shattering the heavy iron chains holding the Merman prince. Armani is completely stunned. He admits he thought Turan was just going to take the treasure and sell him off to a merchant anyway. Turan tells him he simply keeps his promises. Armani tears up, calling him a kind demon and promising to tell his Merman father not to kill him if they ever go to war with humans. Turan tells him to stop talking nonsense and pulls his shirt back on. With a dramatic splash, Armani dives back into the lake, transforming into a glowing green stream of pure aquatic energy as he swims away. Turan watches him go, realizing the kid wasn't lying about being royalty after all. The next day, Turan is back on the merchant ship, which has docked at a nearby port city, but the peaceful morning is quickly ruined by the sound of painful groans. On the deck, several sailors are sitting with bloody, whipped backs, groaning in pain. The ship's veteran officer is standing over them, swinging a heavy whip and lecturing the crew. Turan steps out of his cabin, asking what all the noise is about. A sailor explains that these guys crawled back late last night and caused a massive brawl at the harbor tavern, and this is their punishment for ignoring the captain's warnings. Turan watches the whipping in silence, his expression completely blank. But through his magic eyes, he sees something different. He can physically see their life force, shaped like blue and orange flames, slowly draining away from their wounds. He asks where the captain went. The sailor tells him the captain went down to the island to find a buyer for the captured pirate ship. In a cozy local tavern, the one-eyed captain is sitting across from another sailor discussing the transaction. He spots Turan entering and quickly stands up to welcome him, eager to share the news. He introduces the buyer, Captain Samuel, who has agreed to buy the pirate ship for a clean lump sum of 1,000 gold coins. Turan sits down, noting that there's just one problem with that deal. He explains that carrying around a giant chest of heavy gold coins is incredibly inconvenient for a traveler. He asks if he can receive magic tools or holy relics of equivalent value instead. Samuel laughs, telling him that such rare items aren't found in a basic port town like this. He tells Turan he'll have to go to Komad. He explains that Komad is the second largest city in the Zahar territory, ruled by House Durman, a prestigious family of beast tamers. He suggests Turan buy himself a high-tier monster mount with his share of the money. A tamer, huh? Turan imagines himself riding a derpy-looking cartoon horse and decides that having a beast that can actually understand human speech would be incredibly useful for his journey. With the deal finalized, the merchant ship sets sail once again, heading toward the northern desert. The crew is in high spirits, laughing about how this voyage turned a bunch of hostile pirates into giant bags of cash, all thanks to serving our guy. But their celebration is cut short when the lookout screams from the crow's nest. He looks up at the sky, his face pale with fear. A massive wall of pitch-black storm clouds is rolling in, completely blocking out the sun. The sea immediately turns violent, massive waves slamming against the wooden hull as the rain pours down. The captain screams orders, telling the men to hurry up and furl the sails before the wind tears them apart. He warns them that if they don't want to become fish food, they need to secure the heavy cargo chests immediately. A massive wave hits the side of the ship, tilting the deck at a terrifying angle. The violent lurch throws several sailors off the rigging, sending them flying into the air as they scream in terror. They plunge toward the churning, violent sea, completely helpless. But right before they hit the water, the falling sailors suddenly freeze mid-air, surrounded by a glowing blue light. Turan is standing calmly on the deck, his hand raised. He's literally using his conceptual gravity magic to pause the entire physics engine of the ocean. He casually sweeps his hand, pulling the floating sailors and loose wooden crates back onto the deck with a blue tractor beam. He tells them to get down and hold on tight. The terrified sailors scramble to the floor, nodding in absolute awe. Turan snaps his fingers again, sending out a stream of blue mana that wraps around the loose rigging like magic ropes, perfectly securing the heavy barrels and sliding cargo chests in a split second. With the deck secured, the captain screams for everyone to retreat below deck as the storm rages outside. Down in the dark, damp cargo hold, the crew is shivering from the freezing rain, huddled together in fear. Turan enters the hold, wiping the water from his face. The crew immediately bows, thanking him for saving their lives. Turan asks if anyone is hurt, and when they say they're fine, he simply smiles and says that's enough. The captain joins them, soaking wet, and notes that if Turan hadn't furled the sails with his magic, the ship would have capsized instantly. Turan asks if the ship can withstand the storm, and the captain says they have to trust the helmsman. He looks over at the shivering sailors, who are literally vibrating from the freezing cold. Turan looks at their miserable state and sighs. He tells everyone to gather around him in a tight circle. The captain looks panicked, asking if Turan is seriously planning to start a fire on a cramped wooden boat in the middle of a storm. Turan just snaps his fingers, telling him he'll make sure it doesn't spread. A brilliant, perfectly spherical orb of pure fire ignites in his hand, radiating a gentle, intense warmth. He raises his hand, sending warm waves of heat washing over the entire cargo hold. The warm air dries their clothes instantly, without scorching a single piece of wood. The captain is completely speechless at the level of precision. The sailors let out sighs of relief, basking in the magic warmth. The captain looks at Turan, a deep look of realization dawning on his face. He remembers the ancient instructions the old-timers used to repeat until their final breath: humans shall serve the wizard. A few days later, the storm finally clears, and the ship docks at Komad, the largest oasis city in the northern Emerald Desert. The bustling port is filled with massive sandstone buildings and merchant ships unloading their goods. The captain approaches Turan on the sandy dock, handing him a massive, heavy sack of gold. Turan tries to decline, but the captain insists, telling him the crew chipped in from the sale of the pirate ship and that God will be angry if they don't reward their savior. Turan accepts the heavy bag, promising to treat them to a proper meal if they ever cross paths again. The captain bows, calling it an honor. As Turan walks away, the crew lines up along the ship's railing, waving and shouting their farewells. They're screaming that they'll miss him and will never forget what he did for them. The captain places his hand over his heart, giving him a respectful, formal salute. Turan waves back with a gentle smile, carrying his massive sack of gold over his shoulder. He turns toward the blazing desert sun, entering the grand sand-colored streets of Komad. The city is massive, filled with merchants riding camels and desert travelers in white robes. Turan blends into the crowd, his silver hair drawing a few curious looks from the locals. Suddenly, his sharp eyes spot a group of elite armored guards walking through the square. Using his magic vision, he can see they carry a distinct, high-tier mana signature. They're definitely Knights of House Durman. Turan approaches one of the armored guards standing on patrol. He clears his throat, calling out to him. As the guard turns around with an annoyed look, Turan briefly unleashes a tiny, concentrated pulse of his noble tier mana, his eyes flaring with a cold blue light. The guard is instantly crushed by the sheer pressure, his face turning pale as he bows so fast he almost hits his head on the dirt, shouting that he is at his command. Turan introduces himself as Turan Brahms from Abacha, calmly stating that he wishes to see the head of the house. The guard immediately escorts him to the grand palace-like estate of House Durman, surrounded by palm trees and golden domes. Turan is brought into a lavish parlor where he is given a fine silk robe to wear while he waits. A muscular man sitting on a grand sofa looks him over, noting that the robe suits him well. The man introduces himself as Cal Durman, the head of the household. He's covered in tribal tattoos and dark face paint, radiating a wild, dangerous energy. But as Cal looks at Turan's face, his eyes suddenly freeze. Turan notices the sudden shift in his expression. Cal quickly hides his surprise, asking for his name and household. Turan gives his prepared cover story, Turan Brahms, of a fallen guardian bloodline. He explains he came to buy a high-tier monster mount. Cal nods, recovering his composure, and says he'll have his daughter guide him through the breeding grounds. Before leaving, Turan hesitates and asks if Cal has seen someone who looks like him before. Cal claims it's nothing, saying he just thought Turan looked a bit like someone he used to know. But the tense silence in the room suggests otherwise. As they walk down the grand hallway, Cal's daughter, a beautiful girl in a stunning gold dress, teases him, noting that for a fallen noble, he seems to have a massive amount of money. She asks if he made his fortune as a mercenary, since guardian bloodlines are perfect for combat. Turan remains silent, lost in thought. He's wondering whose face Cal actually saw when he looked at him. Was it his mother? He remembers her soft, curly dark hair and gentle face. Or was it his biological father, a man whose face he has never once seen in his entire life? The girl snaps him out of his thoughts, announcing that they've arrived. She opens the heavy iron doors, welcoming him to the Grand House Durman breeding grounds. Turan looks around, completely blown away by the scale of the facility. It is a massive, multi-tiered indoor sanctuary where each room has its own simulated natural habitat. He passes a forest zone filled with powerful wolves and looks down at a jungle zone where a massive armored elephant is roaming. Turan spots a sleek, powerful horse in one of the stable enclosures and asks for the price. The girl casually says it costs 4,000 gold coins. Turan's face goes completely pale. 4,000. That is literally twice his entire pirate fortune. He realizes he is actually broke. He wonders if he should just give up on getting a mount, but he also can't carry a heavy chest of gold across the desert on foot. Suddenly, he stops walking. His eyes are drawn to a lone, gilded birdcage hanging from the ceiling. Inside the cage is a massive, dark eagle. It has sharp, highly intelligent yellow eyes and a regal, grumpy posture. Turan points to the cage, asking how much it costs. The girl says it's 1,500 coins. Turan thinks that's a bargain considering its massive mana capacity. He asks what its special abilities are. The girl deadpans, saying it's smart and flies well. Turan just stares at her. That's it? She explains that this species is actually too smart for its own good. It has a massive ego and absolutely refuses to listen to anyone it deems dumber than itself. The eagle proudly nods its head as if agreeing with her statement. Turan walks up to the bars, asking the bird if it can actually understand him. The eagle gives him a slow, deliberate nod. Turan chuckles, noting that it's a bit ugly though. The eagle immediately shakes its head in anger, its feathers puffing up. The girl is surprised, explaining that they tried to teach it to read, but it completely refused to learn. She complains that it's a waste of money because they fed it expensive monster meat, and it would be worth so much more if it just obeyed orders. She asks the bird if there's anything it actually wants, expecting no response. But the eagle suddenly reaches its massive claw through the bars and points its sharp talon directly at Turan's face. The girl gasps, completely shocked by the sudden reaction. Turan looks at the bird, asking if it wants to choose him as its master. The eagle nods. Turan notes that he's not a special person, asking if there's a specific reason it chose him. He grins, asking if he buys it, will it actually be willing to learn how to read? The eagle gives him a firm, respectful nod. It's a deal. Cal Durman is called in to finalize the purchase. He conjures a bright swirling vortex of tamer magic in his hands, slamming the glowing crest forward to complete the soul-bonding ritual between Tehran and the eagle. The magic fades, and the massive bird happily flies out of its cage, landing perfectly on Tehran's arm. Cal notes that it's surprising how well the stubborn beast follows him, telling him to take good care of it. Tehran promises he will. As Tehran turns to leave, Cal suddenly stops him. He hesitates, as if debating whether to speak, and finally asks if Tehran happens to have any connection to a man named Talus. Tehran looks confused, repeating the name Talus with a blank face. Seeing his genuine confusion, Cal quickly waves his hand, telling him to forget he asked. Tehran turns away, but his mind is racing. Talus. That is definitely the name of the person Cal saw in his face. Tehran stops, reaching into his cloak, and asks Cal if he can ask him one thing in return. Cal tells him to go ahead. Tehran pulls out a rolled-up piece of parchment, asking if he happens to know a woman named Vijay. He unrolls the paper, showing a beautifully detailed pencil sketch of his mother. Cal examines the drawing in silence, his expression thoughtful. He shakes his head, saying he doesn't know her, noting that if he had met such a striking beauty, there's no way he would have forgotten her. Tehran quietly rolls the sketch back up. To break the heavy tension, Tehran tosses his new eagle into the air, letting it fly. He grins, saying that since the deal is done, he needs to test if his new investment actually works. He raises his arm, and the massive eagle swoops down, its sharp talons gripping his forearm perfectly without scratching his skin. The sheer force of the landing creates a small gust of wind, but Tehran doesn't even flinch. He lets out a bright, genuine laugh, completely satisfied with his new companion. Later that evening, Cal's daughter opens the grand doors to the palace dining hall, inviting Tehran to join them for a banquet to celebrate the successful deal. She asks how the flight test went, and Tehran says it was great and really cleared his head. She introduces Tehran to the other noble guests gathered around the massive table, mentioning he came from the Carmine side of the territory. A massive, scarred warrior sitting at the table looks up, murmuring, "Carmine? Wasn't that near Arabian?" Cal's daughter quickly defends him, telling the brute not to associate their guests with those sparrows from Arabian. The scarred man stands up, introducing himself as Dolph Marin from a history bloodline, and reaches out for a handshake. Tehran takes his hand, and Dolph immediately clamps down with immense crushing force, trying to show off his physical strength. Tehran's eyes go sharp, and he channels a tiny pulse of mana to reinforce his muscles. Dolph's smug grin falters as he realizes his grip is doing absolutely nothing, noting with a sweat that, as expected of a guardian, "You're sturdy." An elegant noblewoman sitting nearby scoffs, telling Dolph to stop his meathead displays because she only came here to see the legendary Smart Eagle. Tehran explains he told the bird to fly around outside since it was cooped up practicing its writing all morning. He offers to call it over. He whistles, and a massive shadow immediately sweeps across the sky. The giant eagle swoops down through the open balcony, landing gracefully on the stone railing. The noblewoman is amazed, walking up to the bird and reaching out her hand, telling it to come to her. The eagle looks at her outstretched hand, lets out a smug scoff, and slaps her hand away with its wing. The noblewoman immediately loses her mind, screaming that it's a damn bird brain, and asking what she lacks that it's acting like this. She rants that she could raise it 10 times better than some fallen noble. Tehran just whispers to the eagle to hold it in and ignore her. As they sit down to eat a lavish feast of roasted meat, the guests start gossiping about recent political news, noting that the dark elf tribes to the west have been causing a ruckus. Dolph asks about the Arabian subjugation force, mentioning he heard the commander is that skinny Mesa. Tehran's hand suddenly freezes, his fork stopping mid-air as he hears Mesa's name. The noblewoman laughs nastily, saying she hopes Mesa gets assassinated this time and that it'll be a great day for everyone if that wench dies. She sneers that Mesa is just skin and bones and a hideous sight. Tehran's eyes go pitch black under his hair, his calm expression turning incredibly cold. The guests continue gossiping, mentioning that House Zahar has it easy since they already have a clear successor lined up. They complain that they wish Talus would just make a clear decision about who will take over. Tehran immediately looks up, asking Cal's daughter what kind of person Talus actually is. She explains that Talus is the house head's younger brother and the current second in command of House Zahar. She adds that he is essentially the one leading the entire house right now, looking at Tehran with a curious expression. The image of Cal Durman's intense gaze flashes in Tehran's mind. So, our guy is sitting at a very expensive dinner table, learning that Talus is basically the shadow boss of the entire Zahar clan. And if this absolute menace is actually his biological dad, things just got significantly more complicated than expected. The next morning, Tehran is chilling on a park bench, trying to process the fact that the head of the house saw his father's face in his. If Talus really is his father, and if Tehran is seen as some kind of family embarrassment, he could get erased the second he is discovered. Meanwhile, his new bird is on the ground practicing its spelling. Turan looks down and reads what the bird wrote. He points out that he definitely did not tell him to write that part and the grammar is terrible. He asks if the eagle has decided on a name yet. The bird scratches the sand writing, "Not yet." Turan asks if "not yet" is its actual name and the bird violently shakes its head. He chuckles, then asks why the bird chose him as its master in the first place. The bird scratches the ground again, writing that Turan's internal energy fits him perfectly. Turan crouches down, pointing out even more spelling mistakes, telling him he has a lot to learn, but his mind is racing, wondering if the bird sensed his mixed Zahar bloodline. Suddenly, Dolph walks up, asking if Turan wants to go hunting to stretch his legs. Turan calmly tells him he's leaving the city today, and Dolph pretends to be disappointed. Our guy is not buying it, knowing Dolph is just trying to assert dominance. Dolph offers to be his guide, but the bird glares at him, and Turan declines. Dolph waves and walks off, acting completely casual. Turan watches him go, finding it highly suspicious that the meathead backed off so easily. Later that afternoon, Turan prepares his gear to head out. He knows he's being watched. The city guards escort him to the main gates under Carl's orders. Turan stops at a shop to buy a desert guidebook and some local religious texts. He drops a heavy gold coin on the desk to pay for them. Walking down the street, he immediately starts flipping through the pages. The book was supported by the main Zahar house, meaning the map should be highly accurate. Suddenly, his magic senses flare up. Through his thermal vision, he spots several suspicious figures with burning blue mana cores tailing him. He gives a dry smile, realizing the vultures are already lining up. The heavy wooden city gates creak open, and Turan steps out into the blazing desert heat, leaving the safety of the walls. He looks at the empty dunes, telling his bird he's going to take his time. The eagle looks at him, highly confused. Turan smiles, saying he just feels like walking for a bit. Night falls over the desert, a silent owl watching from a dead tree. Turan walks alone through the cold sand dunes under the starlight. His footsteps are the only sound in the desert. Suddenly, he stops walking. He tells the shadow behind the rock that they can come out now. Dolph steps into the moonlight, wearing his heavy fur coat with a cocky grin. Turan asks why he thinks he walked all this way instead of flying on his giant bird. Dolph chuckles, walking closer, claiming he just wanted to make sure a young noble stayed safe. Turan gets straight to the point, asking if Dolph is here to steal his mana. Dolph's smile instantly vanishes. He cracks his knuckles, grinning like a maniac, calling Turan either brave or incredibly stupid. He rants about how fallen nobles always act so high and mighty. He looks down on Turan, thinking he has the upper hand. Dolph assumes Turan has a weak, defensive-only bloodline and tells him to hand over his power quietly. Turan realizes Dolph saw him as easy prey because of his high mana and lack of physical display. He raises his arm, telling his eagle to fly up and stay out of the way. He looks at Dolph, saying it's honestly a shame. Dark, swirling smoke begins to wrap around Turan's hands. He reveals that the one who saw the other as delicious food was actually him. Dolph laughs, calling stealth magic a cheap trick that only weak spies use. He screams that breaking stealth is child's play, warning Turan not to run. He takes a defensive stance, expecting a basic ambush. But suddenly, his eyes go wide as he realizes he can't feel Turan's presence at all. No footprint, no smell, no sound. The realization hits him like a truck. Dolph panics, whispering, "Zahar?" But before he can finish the thought, a supersonic projectile slams directly into his face. The impact sends him reeling, a shattered kinetic stone dropping into the sand. He barely has time to react before another kinetic stone rips through the air, hitting him hard. Another supersonic blast hits his jaw, drawing blood. Dolph blocks with his armored forearms, huffing and puffing as the invisible railgun stones keep coming. In a panic, he screams, "Oh flame," and casts a massive fire spell. He thinks if he lights up the entire desert, he can force Turan to reveal himself. Bright, swirling orbs of fire ignite in the night sky. The orbs float above the dunes, illuminating the sand. Dolph looks around, but the desert is completely empty. He has no idea where the attacks are coming from. Suddenly, the floating fireballs reverse direction, turning into a homing barrage. Dolph screams in terror as the flames lock onto him. The explosive fire blasts slam into his back, sending him flying across the sand. Desperate, he channels his strength bloodline and stomp kicks the ground with massive force. A massive shockwave tears through the dunes, shattering the stone ground. He swings his fists wildly into the empty air, screaming for Turan to come out. He is completely losing his mind, screaming at the empty desert, but there is nothing but silence and swirling dust. Dolph stands alone, exhausted, his body covered in burns and sweat. He realizes he is completely cooked and needs to run immediately. He runs, realizing fighting a true Zahar at night in the open desert is literal suicide. He sprints across the dunes, his footsteps kicking up massive clouds of sand. He tries to reassure himself that no stealth mage can catch up to his body-strengthening speed. Suddenly, he hears the sound of heavy wings flapping directly above him. He looks up, his face pale with horror. Turan is literally hitching a ride, casually hanging onto his giant eagle's leg like it's a helicopter. Turan drops down, noting that Dolph is surprisingly sturdy, asking if he has a defensive magic tool. Dolph falls to his knees, begging for mercy. Turan's face is completely shadowed, his expression cold. He looks down at him, saying Dolph already knows he can't do that. Turan fires a towering column of fire directly from his hand, completely incinerating Dolph. Our guy stands over the remains, calmly analyzing the fight. He notes that his basic stone throwing won't be enough against real Zahar guardians, meaning he needs a stronger piercing spell. He raises his hand, declaring it's time for the banquet. He channels his absorption magic, pulling the glowing green mana out of Dolph's corpse. The raw energy flows directly into his palm, expanding his reserves. But as the mana flows, the Freyan compass on his belt suddenly starts vibrating and glowing. Turan looks down in surprise. He pulls out the golden compass, watching the needle spin wildly. He realizes this ancient device is actually storing and reacting to the magical power he just absorbed. He wonders if he should try drinking the energy directly, but decides to research the Freyan object more carefully first. The next day, Turan is back in the air, flying across the desert on his massive eagle. He shields his eyes from the sun, looking ahead. Right there in the distance, a massive golden pyramid rises from the dunes, the tomb of the gods. Later, Turan is sitting in a local tavern talking to a dark-skinned woman. She calls him reckless for traveling alone, asking if he ran into any thieves. Turan says he got lucky, then asks how to get inside the tomb of the gods. The woman smiles but warns him that entry is currently completely restricted. She explains that a week ago, some highly important people arrived and locked the entire place down. She points her finger upward, revealing who those people are. Turan nods, understanding immediately. Inside the massive stone halls of the pyramid, Zahar knights are patrolling the corridors. A panicked guard runs through the halls, screaming for Purga. A voice tells him to stop screaming because they'll be heard. Purga Zahar steps into the light, holding his massive circular blade, looking incredibly annoyed. The companion blames Purga, saying they never should have come inside. Purga tells him to keep his voice down, reminding him they came to secure their position as head of the family. He grinds his teeth, looking extremely stressed. He recalls his grandfather's legend about a hidden underground area in the Tomb of the Gods that would guarantee his succession. He had searched the place for years, finding nothing until they finally discovered the entrance. But instead of treasure, they walked right into a trap. A horde of pale, grotesque, multi-eyed monsters with massive fangs emerges from the shadows. Purga swears, realizing the secret of the tomb is just a massive nest of monsters. The guard reports they are completely out of water, and Purga demands he make some more magic water to wet his throat. Suddenly, a deep, booming, dark voice echoes through the stone temple. Purga's eyes widen in sheer shock. He realizes that even though the voice is speaking a language he has never heard before, he can understand its meaning perfectly. The ancient voice asks if the night hunter has finally returned to the desert. Meanwhile, back in the market, Turan is looking at scrolls of local maps. He knows he needs to stay quiet to avoid running into anyone who might recognize his resemblance to Talus. He decides it's best to keep a low profile. He spots a merchant selling saltpeter, a rare chemical commodity from the southern islands. Turan looks at the white rocks, realizing he's heard that name before. He pulls out the arsonist's research book, flipping through the pages. He finds the recipe for the fire spirit explosive, realizing he finally has the ingredients to reproduce it. He asks the merchant if he has any sulfur, but the merchant says he's never heard of it. A bald local mentions that sulfur is only found in volcanic regions, which are rare in the desert. Turan scratches his head, realizing he'll have to find a volcano eventually. The merchant offers him brown sugar, but Turan declines, saying he doesn't like sweets. Later, Turan goes out to the dunes to practice his sling magic. He spins his sling, launching a handful of sand instead of a stone. The sand blast turns into a sharp supersonic drill that shatters a massive boulder. Turan is pleased with the result, realizing sand is a perfect alternative to carrying heavy stones. He manipulates the sand in his hand, realizing he can shapeshift the projectiles mid-flight. He touches his leather pouch, noting he only has a few crafted stones left. He practices moving his sand magic to bind ankles and block vision. He looks over at the massive golden pyramid, wondering what the Zahar nobles are still doing inside. He debates whether he should just ignore them and go to another city, but curiosity gets the better of him. He approaches the massive stone entrance of the tomb. He decides he can always sneak in and run away if things go sideways. Suddenly, his sharp ears pick up muffled screaming nearby. He spots two guards dragging a heavy sack, telling the person inside to shut up. One of the guards violently kicks the sack to silence the hostage. Turan hides behind a massive stone pillar, watching them drag the hostage deeper into the pyramid. He follows them down, wondering what the guards are doing with these local citizens. He peeks around the corner, his eyes narrowing. In the center of a grand hall, a massive, swirling black vortex of dark mana is spinning on the floor. The guards pull a terrified citizen out of the sack, forcing him to stand before the portal. Turan watches in silence, his expression grim. The kidnappers look absolutely terrified themselves. They hand the hostage heavy wooden barrels of water, forcing him to step directly into the dark void. Turan watches the citizen's terrified face as he is pushed forward. The man reluctantly steps into the swirling black portal, disappearing from sight. Turan hides behind some crates, analyzing the spell. It's a high-tier animal manipulation portal. He overhears the guards talking about how they need to keep sending food and water to Lord Purga. They mention that they can't let Purga's rivals in the main family find out he is trapped inside. Turan looks at the swirling black vortex. A cold smile spreads across his face. He stands up, preparing to leap. He thinks if he saves the Zahar successor candidate, he'll have a perfect excuse to approach the main house naturally. He leaps straight into the swirling dark portal. He falls through the darkness, his cloak billowing. But as he plunges deep into the void, his head suddenly cools down, and he realizes he was being mentally influenced by an ancient suggestion spell inside the tomb. Suddenly, a painful scream echoes through the chamber. Turan lands on the other side of the portal, stepping into a massive stone dungeon. He spots Purga sitting casually on water barrels, drinking, while a beaten courier lies on the floor. Purga complains about the annoying noise, telling his men to execute the courier to save food. A ruthless Zahar knight stomps on the courier's head with massive force. Turan watches the brutal execution, his eyes completely dark. He realizes Purga is an absolute piece of garbage who will never repay a favor. Suddenly, a deep, raspy voice speaks directly to Turan from the shadows. The entity whispers that he is wrong, declaring that he is not the Night Hunter. Way back in the day, the fertile Enril Plains weren't actually a desert. They were ruled by giants. And these absolute units drank water like college kids at an open bar, eventually drying out the entire continent. When they got too thirsty, they enslaved humans and treated them like literal juice boxes. But on a dark, moonless night, a legendary figure walked out of the sunrise, the Night Hunter of the Freyans. This absolute king single-handedly wiped out every giant, saving humanity from being completely drank dry. The survivors were so grateful they offered him 3 beautiful maidens as brides. His 3 kids inherited broken cheats, one could conceal his body, one could command shadows, and one could create poison. After the Night Hunter ascended back to the heavens, the brothers immediately did what brothers always do, started fighting over who gets the master bedroom. The eldest, who had the stealth cheat, dipped because he didn't want to deal with the family drama, but the Shadow and Poison brothers threw hands in a brutal war that turned the entire desert into a wasteland. Eventually, the eldest brother returned, beat them both up, and claimed dominion over the sands. He is the founding ancestor of House Zahar. Back in the present, the creepy voice from the walls repeats that Turan is not the guy they're looking for. Turan is standing there thinking, why is this random dungeon name-dropping ancient gods? He remembers he's technically a distant Zahar descendant, so there might be a connection. Suddenly, his passive sensory tracking flares up. He turns around instantly. There is something hiding in the shadows, a glowing blue mana core. It is a sleek, hairless humanoid creature standing between the pillars. It creeps forward, its claws scraping the stone. Turan stares at it, completely unimpressed. Up close, it looks like a genetically modified gym bro with a severe lack of skincare. Looks thoroughly unpleasant, he says. The creature's eye twitches. It stares straight through his Zahar stealth. It lunges. Turan slips backward, his cloak billowing. claps his hands, fires a massive stream of flame. The fire engulfs the beast, but it doesn't even slow down. Turan slides back again. He is surprised. This thing can actually detect him while he is completely invisible. Fortunately, he notices its detection range is actually pretty small. He pulls out a stone, spins his sling, fires. The supersonic rock tears its head clean off. Simple as that. But the other monsters standing nearby don't even flinch when their buddy's head gets vaporized. Zero teamwork. Turan walks over to the corpse, reaches his hand out. He tries to absorb its mana core. The green energy rises, but it's incredibly faint. He realizes he can't get any real mana from it, meaning it's a magical construct rather than a living beast. This is a bit of a scam. For something with high physical stats, its mana tank was practically empty, and the golden Freyan compass didn't even vibrate. So what is its true identity? The spooky voice echoes again. You are not the Night Hunter. Turan sighs. This is getting annoying. He leaps up onto a high ledge to avoid being spotted, just in time because heavy footsteps approach. It's Purga Zahar and his elite squad of unpaid lightbulbs. They spot the dead construct on the floor. The lackeys are complaining about being completely lost in the dark. Purga looks around, narrowing his eyes, saying there's a rat in here. The guards wonder if it's a rescue party, but Purga shuts that down. He tells Galthan to lay traps to catch this rat. He orders Imelda to keep casting light. He decides to let the rat run around for now and use him as bait for the monsters. Turan watches them walk away from his high ground. Classic villain behavior, planning to use the MC as bait while they have no idea they're the ones being farmed. 3 days later, they are still stuck in this pitch-black labyrinth. Fortunately, the traps laid by Purga's barrier bearer are glowing like neon signs through the Freyan compass. Meanwhile, Purga's guys are so blind they keep stepping on their own traps. Absolute comedy gold. Turan uses his compass to map out safe zones, slowly expanding his search while the nobles are running in circles. When a corridor is completely packed with constructs, Turan doesn't waste his own ammo. He just bait leads them toward Purga's group, who have their lights on and act as a giant monster magnet. Purga does all the heavy lifting, while Turan doesn't mind losing the trash tier mana. Meanwhile, the poor commoner couriers sent through the portal are piling up as corpses. Purga's guys are casually looting the water and food off the dead commoners they literally let die. One of them jokes that they should have kept them alive to serve drinks. Turan watches from the corner, thinking these guys are absolute garbage. Suddenly, a loud rumble shakes the ceiling. The monsters are returning. Turan grins. Perfect. Keep making noise while I go rob the deeper vault. He slips away into the shadows, heading further down. He reaches the end of the corridor. He stops. There is a massive stone door blocking the path. It looks like it was built for giants. Suddenly, a deep rumbling sound. The center of the door begins to shift. A giant glowing blue eye opens in the middle of the stone. The voice speaks, You, hunter-pursuer. Conditions not met. The eyeball rolls, looking down. It stares directly at the Freyan compass on his belt. The compass glows. Voice, Wave Rider. Mimic. Conditions met. The giant eye blinks. The voice asks, Will you enter? Turan is thinking, Wave Rider and Mimic? Are those ancestral bloodlines I haven't unlocked yet? The eyeball remains fixed. He realizes the door isn't evaluating his actual bloodline, but the signature of the Freyan relic on his belt. It's basically a security bypass. He asks the door what Wave Rider and Mimic actually mean. The door spirit explains. Wave Rider gives underwater breathing and fluid manipulation. Mimic lets him detect, absorb, and copy flows. He hasn't got those powers active, but the door reads them anyway. He asks, What are you? The door replies, Door Spirit. It's like the cute library ghost from Aurum, but significantly colder and has zero personality. He asks how to get out of this labyrinth. The door tells him, This is the labyrinth of the Night Hunter. Whoever defeats the Sovereign will become the Night Hunter, and once the Sovereign is dead, the exit opens. But suddenly, the system glares. Error! 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 The eyeball starts spinning wildly. Hunter, Stalker, Wave Rider, Mimic. Error in 2 types. Shadow Alchemist absent. It realizes he's a fake who doesn't have the complete package. Unauthorized intruders detected. Impossible to seal. The eye cracks open, glowing red. Consulting creator. Error. Creator absent. Initiating autonomous judgment. Deploying Labyrinth Sovereign. This is bad. Turan backs up. Something massive is rumbling behind the door. The heavy stones shift. The giant door slowly opens. A terrifying shadow emerges. Turan's eyes go wide. It's a massive, pale giant with long black hair and a creepy mask-like face. The sovereign screeches, "You are not the Night Hunter! Fakes must die!" It swings. Turan dodges, casts a dual barrier of fire and lightning. The blast hits the monster dead on, but the giant just stands there through the smoke. That tickles. It is completely unharmed. Turan slides back, realizing he stands zero chance in a direct confrontation. He runs. The sovereign screams, summoning a massive horde of smaller constructs. A sea of pale monsters chases him down the corridor. Turan weaves through them, dodges a swipe midair, kicks a monster's chest to leap away. Another beast lunges from above. Turan raises his defensive mana shield. The monster's claw shatters the shield. He's shocked. It pierced through Mello's bracelet? He barely rolls out of the way. He sprints, thinking this place was built to produce a god. Who actually made this? The giant sovereign is stomping right behind him. Turan looks ahead, spotting a familiar group of people. He grins. He's about to play his favorite card, outsourcing the problem. He slides right past Purga's squad. One thing is certain, I need to get them to fight each other. He yells back, "How about we fight together, cousin?" The sovereign charges, crashing directly into Purga's front line. Purga's men are instantly thrown into chaos. Purga screams, "Is everyone all right?" His veteran knights are panting, realizing this is a completely different tier of monster. Suddenly, a weird sound. The sovereign is muttering, "Night Hunter, enemy of children, kill them all!" The guards think he's speaking gibberish, but the sheer weight of his mana is terrifying. It lunges. Purga yells to stand ground, but the giant's arm sweeps, crushing two knights into paste. Purga watches in horror as his top supporters, Ubo and Galthan, get absolutely vaporized. He attacks in a panic, channeling his circular blade. A swordsman tries to pierce the beast's arm. Hits it, but his sword breaks. The giant backhands him through a pillar. A mage fires a massive ball of flame. Sovereign stomps the ground, shatters the floor. The shockwave tears the mage apart. The smaller constructs swarm the survivors. Purga is bleeding. Realize they are about to get completely exterminated. He spots Turan dodging in the background, thinking he's also struggling to survive. One of Purga's giant axemen leaps high into the air with his weapon. He swings down with everything he's got, hits the sovereign's knee, shattering the joint. He laughs maniacally. "I actually did it! I broke his knee!" The sovereign calmly raises its massive foot and stomps him into grease. Purga's face goes completely pale. "It's over! It's all over!" All his supporters are dead. His political career in the Zahar family is officially finished before it even started. The massive sovereign stands over him, its white eyes glowing in the dark. Purga snaps. "This is your fault!" He throws his massive crescent blade at the beast's neck. It connects. Huge explosion. Swirling blue energy. He channels his entire mana pool into the blade. Slashes through. Smoke fills the room. Purga pants, looking at the silent dust. "Ha! A direct hit. I did it." But through the smoke, a single white eye glows. The sovereign is completely unfazed. Purga frozen. The giant's hand drives straight through his chest, lifting him into the air. Purga coughs blood, wondering where it all went wrong as his life fades. The sovereign drops him like trash. "Where are you, fake? Show yourself!" It turns around, looking directly at the pillar where Turan is hiding. Turan prepares his sling, realizing his stealth is completely useless here. The giant leaps. The sovereign is completely locked onto him, screeching about fakes needing to be deleted. Turan leaps high into the air, drawing his weapon, and swings down with absolute crushing force. The heavy blade bites straight into the giant's shoulder, drawing black blood as the monster screams. Turan notes that his physical strength still isn't quite high enough to one-shot this absolute unit. The sovereign's giant hollow eye flares with rage, and it launches a massive backhand swipe that splits the air. Turan raises his defensive barrier, the impact sending him sliding across the stone floor as sparks fly. He looks down at his golden compass, realizing he needs more offensive firepower to end this. He decides he has no choice but to test the new bloodline power he absorbed from Dolph outside the gates. He channels the energy, his eyes flaring with a bright electric blue light. The sovereign charges once again, its massive fist hurtling toward him. But Turan is already gone, leaving only a blur of high-speed dust. He materializes directly above the beast, wrapping both hands around his hilt as a massive purple aura erupts. He swings down like a human guillotine, shearing straight through the monster's neck as it screams about its children. The massive head bounces off the stone pillars, and Tehran lands gracefully on the floor, as a massive fountain of dark blood paints the walls. The giant's headless body stands frozen for a split second before collapsing heavily into the dirt. The remaining minor constructs turn into piles of silent ash. Tehran slowly sheathes his blade, breathing heavily as the dark purple mana disperses, leaving only the quiet sound of his footsteps echoing through the temple. He looks over at the pools of blood and collapses onto the floor with a tired sigh. He admits that if he hadn't absorbed Dolph's body-strengthening cheat code, this boss fight would have been a complete disaster. He examines the compass, realizing the imitator function is definitely active, even if swallowing that core was disgusting. The stolen strength is already starting to fade, and he estimates he only has about 30 minutes of buff left. He walks over to Purga, who is lying in a pool of his own blood, gasping for air. Tehran looks at the deep chest wounds, noting a punctured lung and a damaged heart. Purga begs him to save his life, but Tehran calmly tells him this is far beyond his healing capabilities. Purga's eyes slowly lose their light, and he takes his final breath, his head dropping sideways into the sand. Tehran stands over the dead nobles, looking at the bodies of the Zahar successor candidates. He reflects on how Purga was a cruel, selfish man who treated commoners like garbage, but he also respects that the man fought to the absolute bitter end against the horrors of this tomb. He murmurs, "Purga Zahar, I will remember you," and channels his absorption magic, pulling the massive glowing green Zahar mana out of the corpses. The raw energy flows into his compass, lighting it up with a brilliant, rainbow-colored vortex. Tehran is curious about what would happen if he activated multiple stolen bloodlines at once, but decides to save that test for later. He can feel his internal mana capacity surging, making him at least twice as strong as when he entered the pyramid. To avoid having the main Zahar family hunt him down for the murder of their heirs, he decides to leave Purga's circular magic weapon behind. He runs through the corridor, using his tracking magic to locate any lingering traces of his own mana signature, and systematically dissolves them, leaving only clean blue water stains on the dusty stone floor. He approaches the massive security door once again. The giant eyeball is closed, the stone mechanism silent. Tehran places his hand on the ancient stone, and the heavy doors slowly slide open with a deep rumble. He steps inside, his gray eyes scanning the hidden chamber. In the center of the room, a massive swirling black vortex is spinning on the floor, surrounded by ancient knight statues. That whirlpool is definitely the exit out of this nightmare, but his eyes spot a leather-bound book sitting on a pedestal next to the throne. He picks it up, reading the title, "Experiment to Reproduce the Ascension Process of the Night Hunter." A class change? He flips through the ancient pages, reading the recipe. Night Hunter requires the combination of Hunter, Pursuer, Shadow, and Alchemist bloodlines. Tehran realizes that is why he felt such a powerful, hypnotic urge to enter the pyramid when he first saw it. He reads further, learning that the rotting jaw monsters were artificially created, synthesized from the preserved flesh and acidic blood of the ancient giants. He looks at the complex, incomprehensible formulas, realizing the creators were trying to mass-produce a god. He slams the book shut, realizing the gate mistook him for a perfect candidate simply because his compass carried the signatures of the missing lineages. He knows the Shadow and Alchemist bloodlines are completely extinct, having been wiped out by the Zahar family centuries ago. He remembers the arsonist's notes about god-tier relics capable of permanently synthesizing and stealing bloodlines, but he knows he has no time to dwell on this and leaps straight into the swirling dark whirlpool before the exit closes. The portal spits him out high in the sky, and he falls through the air, his black cloak billowing. He lands on a snowy sand dune, gasping for air, realizing he is finally out of the golden pyramid. He looks down at the snow, noticing several letters scratched into the ice. His giant eagle is sitting nearby, furiously flapping its wings and complaining that he is late and that it was terrifying waiting alone. Tehran chuckles, patting its head and apologizing, and grabs onto the eagle's powerful leg. The bird takes off with a powerful surge, lifting him high above the frozen dunes. Tehran knows that killing a Zahar successor candidate and 10 other nobles is going to cause a massive panic in the desert. He decides it's best to leave the Emerald Desert for a few months until the heat dies down, and then resume the search for his mother. He tells the bird to change direction, pointing toward the gray mountains on the horizon. They fly through a freezing blizzard, the wind howling around them. They land at the base of a massive, snow-covered mountain range. Tehran looks around, noting that this is the gray zone, the lawless buffer territory where Arabian and Zahar once fought their bloody war. Suddenly, his eagle alerts him to a crowd of people. He spots a long, miserable line of refugees carrying heavy crates, fleeing from the mountains. He follows the path up, arriving at the gates of the gray city of Kalamov, a snowy fortress built on a sheer cliff. The guards at the gate spot him, their eyes widening. They stare at his fancy, self-cleaning noble coat and the massive, intelligent eagle resting on his shoulder. One of the guards gasps and immediately falls to his knees, trembling and asking if he belongs to a great noble family. Tehran sighs, realizing his expensive clothes are too flashy and that he needs to buy a simpler traveling tunic next time. He tells them he's just a passing traveler, asking if he can request lodging from the lord of the city for one night. The guard looks terrified, explaining that Kalamov no longer has a lord. He explains the lord recently died during a brutal dark elf invasion from the west, and there is currently not a single knight or noble left to govern the city. Tehran crosses his arms, thinking this is going to make finding a warm bed incredibly complicated. Suddenly, the guard slams his head on the snowy ground. Weeping, he begs Tehran, pleading for him to become the new master and ruler of their dying city. The guard is still on his knees, begging the random teenager who just walked out of the blizzard to become their king. They're so desperate they are literally handing out municipal ownership like free samples. Tehran just stares at the massive snowy fortress, utterly dumbfounded. He tells them that's a difficult request, knowing he can't afford to be tied down to a single city when he's on a time-sensitive search. But as he looks at the miserable, shivering citizens carrying their dying relatives on wooden carts, his inner shepherd kicks in. He can't just walk away. He tells the guard to stand up and explain exactly what happened here. They sit down in a quiet, empty tavern to discuss the crisis. The guard explains that 3 weeks ago, several local monster hunters were found dead on the road, their iron weapons sliced clean through with a single strike. Realizing it was a high-tier threat, they sent 2 knights, who never returned. Then they sent 10 more, and they also disappeared without a trace. Eventually, the lord of the house went himself, and only one battered knight crawled back alive, whispering the word wraith with his final breath. A wraith. Tehran's eyes go sharp. He remembers his first real fight with Kiorn. The guard weeps, saying a scholar told them the wraiths are being controlled by dark elves from the west, who will swarm and devour the city in a few days. Tehran asks if they requested reinforcements from nearby cities, and the guard says they were all rejected because the neighboring lords are too scared of losing their own troops. Tehran nods, understanding that under traditional noble logic, sacrificing a dying border city to preserve your own fortress is the only logical choice. He stands up, saying he understands the situation, but notes it will be difficult for him to handle this. The guard immediately throws himself back onto the floor, weeping that their weak commoner sheep need a strong shepherd to protect them. The shepherd and the sheep. The exact metaphor his mother, Vijay, used to repeat to him every single day. Tehran freezes, asking if that specific metaphor is commonly used in this territory. The guard says yes, explaining it's a common proverb in the gray zone: nobles are the shepherds, knights are the sheepdogs, and commoners are the sheep who follow them. Tehran's mind is blown. This means his mother definitely came from this frozen wasteland, or at least lived here for a significant portion of her life. He quickly reaches into his backpack, pulling out the detailed sketch of Vijay, and asks if the guard has seen this woman. The guard examines the blank-faced drawing, saying he's not sure, but promises to distribute copies to every citizen in the city to check. Tehran looks at the guard's anxious, desperate eyes, realizing the stakes. It means if he wants to find his mother, he has to keep this city from being wiped off the map first. He tells them he cannot be the lord of their city. However, he says, I can be its protector. The guard's face lights up with absolute joy, calling him their savior. Later that evening, Tehran stands on the grand wooden balcony of the fortress, looking down at the hundreds of gathered refugees. The city officials announce that a powerful, noble descendant of the gods has arrived to save them, telling the crowd to throw away their fear. The citizens are whispering, highly skeptical, noting that while he's handsome, monsters aren't going to run away from a pretty face. The guards tell them to shut their mouths, but Tehran remains silent. He can see the anxiety and trauma in their eyes. They are preemptively building a wall of doubt because they've been abandoned by nobles so many times. He remembers Mesa Arabian summoning a massive storm to rally her troops. Back then, he thought it was just meaningless noble show-off behavior, but now he understands the psychology. For the sheep to feel safe, they need to see the shepherd's power with their own eyes. He decides to put on a decent show. He raises his hand toward the dark winter sky. A massive, swirling vortex of flame ignites above his palm, compressing into a dense, glowing sphere. To avoid burning down the wooden houses, he lowers the thermal temperature of the fire, focusing entirely on visual range and light refraction. He launches the compressed star straight into the clouds. The projectile pierces the sky and explodes into a massive city-wide aurora of roaring golden flames. The entire winter sky is covered in a beautiful, warm fire blanket, melting the falling snow mid-air. The brilliant light illuminates the entire mountain range, turning night into day. Turan maximizes the spell's range, letting the gentle, harmless warmth wash over the shivering crowd. The citizens are completely awestruck, shielding their eyes from the brilliant, divine glow. They stare up at the burning sky in absolute silence, completely unable to process the scale of the magic. Suddenly, the crowd erupts into tears and cheers, falling to their knees and crying that they are saved. Turan lowers his hand, thinking this theatrical display should be more than enough to buy their absolute loyalty, but his peace is short-lived. The next morning, the town council is already screaming at each other, arguing about whether to prioritize gathering firewood or rationing their tiny scrap of food. Turan enters the room, sighing, knowing this meeting will go on until tomorrow morning if he doesn't take charge. He announces he will solve the food problem. The council members freeze, staring at him in confusion. The administrator asks what kind of high-tier magic method he plans to use. Turan casually says he's just going to herd all the wild mountain animals directly into the city gates to make a massive stock of meat stew and dried hides. The nobles look horrified, complaining that using the sacred power of the gods for basic shepherd work is an absolute disgrace to noble protocol. Turan points out that northern nobles use lightning to fertilize their harvest fields, so using magic to herd goats is literally no different. He hitches a ride on his giant eagle, flying high over the snowy mountain valleys. He looks down at the thousands of wild beasts scattered across the slopes. He channels his conceptual voice command, projecting his mana over the entire mountain range, whispering, "Move toward that place." The magic waves wash over the valley, and thousands of wild goats, rabbits, mountain leopards, and wolves suddenly freeze, their eyes glowing with a calm blue light, and they begin marching in a massive, peaceful line. Turan grins, noting that herding wild panthers is slightly more tiring than herding sheep, but it's a craft he's been practicing since he was 10 years old. Back at the city gates, the guards are standing watch, their jaws dropping as thousands of wild animals march peacefully across the stone bridge in perfect order, like a scene out of a fairy tale. The citizens are amazed, whispering that the previous lords could never do this because their new protector is a true god-tier wizard. They immediately get to work, dividing the meat and drying the hides to prepare for the long winter. Turan stands before the grand castle gates, ordering the administrators to open the palace doors to accommodate the refugees whose homes were destroyed by the elves. The guard is shocked, asking where their lord protector will be staying if the castle is filled with commoners. Turan says a simple bed in the city hall lodging is more than enough for him. The citizens are weeping in the castle halls, crying that their savior is literally carving off his own flesh to feed his sheep. Turan looks out the window thinking he has zero interest in being deified. He's only doing this because a stable city is the only way to find clues about Vij. Meanwhile, in a grand palace miles away, a noble hand strokes a chinbeard. At Baigan Castle, the local lords are already gossiping about the rumors of a new protector ruling Kalamath. They note he looks to be only about 20 years old. The Lord of Baigan scoffs, saying that's far too young. At Balin Castle, another lord is examining reports, noting that this kid displayed a fire spell that illuminated the entire sky. He muses that if he possesses such monstrous power at 20, he's either incredibly lucky or a hidden weapon nurtured by one of the great houses. At Haran Castle, the guards are patrolling the battlements. The Lord of Haran suspects something fishy, wondering why a genius wizard would take over a hollowed-out border city. One of the advisors wonders if he is a hidden talent sent by the Zahar family, noting that Turan Zahar has a nice ring to it. They decide to play it safe and pretend to tolerate his rule for now to avoid angering Zahar. Back in his office, Turan rubs his ear, grumbling that his ears feel itchy for some reason, unaware that every lord in the region is currently losing their mind over him. He looks down at the drawing of Vijay on his desk. He sighs, realizing there are 8 cities and over 100 villages in this territory. He wonders what the actual odds of finding her are. Suddenly, the door creaks open. The administrator runs in with a document, apologizing for bringing only disappointment over the past week, but announcing that this time is different. He explains they found a vagrant named Egon who claims a woman looking exactly like the portrait stayed at his inn 18 years ago. 18 years ago. The timing is too specific to be a coincidence. Egon is brought in, falling to his knees and thanking Turan for the food and shelter that saved his life. Turan tells him he's glad he's better, demanding to hear the story of the woman in detail. Egon starts his tale, explaining it happened back before his downfall when he ran a proper inn in the city. At the time, Kalamov was in complete chaos due to the brutal civil war between Arabian and Zahar. In the middle of the panic, a young woman wearing a heavy travel cloak came to his inn, seeking shelter. She was pregnant, her belly slightly swollen. She was traveling completely alone on a magnificent horse, looking incredibly anxious and nervous, as if running away from a dangerous predator. Egon wondered what kind of scumbag would abandon a pregnant beauty. Tehran asks why he thought she was abandoned. Egon says that while she was eating, she stroked her belly and whispered to herself, "My dear baby, please, please, don't become like your father." Tehran's eyes go wide, his breath catching in his throat as the words hit him. He finally found her.